Chapter 435. Genius in a second to remember love go divided by small. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Please enjoy. The maid placed the wine on the square table and looked at the three of them strangely. If you need more wine, just pull the rope by the door. Love go small TalkNet cool, got it. You can go. Otto waved his hand. The latter bowed and left. As the door closed, the noise in the hall was blocked out, and the room suddenly became quiet. Until now, he still felt his heart beating fast. He stared at Andrea without blinking, afraid that she would suddenly disappear. I thought it was a dream. Belinda and Oro thought you were dead. I didn't expect to see you again one day. After he couldn't help but shout in the market, the other party also shifted her gaze to him. The fact that she could react to this name proved that she didn't just happen to look like him. No, it should be said that they could not be two people. Andrea's voice and appearance were so outstanding, and her every move had a unique temperament. It was difficult for other women to compare. However, Andrea's reaction was not as surprised as he expected. Instead, she frowned, walked to him, and ordered him to follow her. Then, she hurried out of the market. She probably did not want to attract too many people. Yes, nobles should not shout in a place where commoners gathered. He was too impolite. He followed the two of them into a private room in a tavern, and only then did he have the chance to carefully look at her again. It had been 5 years, but she still looked the same as he remembered. If this was a dream, he hoped that it would last longer. Is this your old lover? The black-haired woman whistled. Since you insisted on coming, you should know the value of silence. Andrea glared at her. No one will think you're mute if you don't speak. I'm doing this to protect you. Roland grinned. Besides, you forced me to buy Tilly's birthday present at first, and now you want to drive me away. Isn't that too unbecoming of a noble? Aristocratic demeanor depends on who you're talking to, Andrea snorted. It's not necessary for you. This is. Ao Tua couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed when he didn't get a response. He could only look at the black-haired woman with an equally outstanding appearance. Your friend? Ashes. Before Andrea could speak, she said directly, who are you, and why do you know her? I'm Atalosai from the Kingdom of Dawn. He was slightly surprised by the question. This woman who called herself Ashes was too blunt and sharp. She did not seem to be a well-educated nobleman. Why would Andrea hang out with such a person? I've known Andrea, my sister Belinda, Oro of the Tokat family, and the eldest son of the King of Dawn, His Highness Appin. We're friends who talk about everything. It sounds like a story about a group of powerful people. Ashes shrugged. Did you just say she's dead? That's because, enough, Andrea interrupted. Belinda and Oro are right. The lady of the Quinn family you're familiar with is dead. But you're still here. Ao Tua shook his head repeatedly. What happened at that time? In the city of Glow, the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn, apart from the royal family, the most prominent nobles were the Tokat, Quinn, and Luashi families. The heads of these families were the king's most trusted companions and ministers with real power. This tradition had been passed down since the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn was established, and it was still the same in this generation. Andrea was the eldest daughter of the Quinn family. She was impeccable in both appearance and family background. She had countless suitors, including Otto and Oro. However, no one expected that during a spring outing, Andrea's carriage would suddenly go out of control and fall into the mountains. This accident even alerted the king. The royal family, together with the three families, searched for a long time before they found her mutilated body at the foot of the mountain. After learning the result, Ao Tua felt sad for a long time. Compared to Oro, who had already started to pursue her, he had not had the chance to tell her his feelings. He had thought that he would never have this chance again. He did not expect to meet her again in this foreign land. After a long time, Andrea sighed softly. It wasn't an accident. What? The carriage went out of control and fell into the mountains 5 years ago. It was all planned by my family, she said in a low voice. My father discovered my identity as a witch. Ao Tua was stunned. A witch? It seems that you hid it well. Ashes covered her mouth and said, you can even hide it from your childhood friends. Andrea ignored her. That's right. After my father learned about it, he immediately arranged for the accident. I wasn't the one in the carriage. Instead, the coachman and the maidservant died. After that, he sent me out of the Kingdom of Dawn and finally lived in seclusion in the broken cliff city of Grey Castle. She paused. In fact, he never asked for my opinion, nor did he care about my opinion. All he did was to get rid of me as soon as possible. So that's what happened. Otto fell silent. The Flower of Glow, who was deeply loved by the people, had turned out to be a witch. If this news got out, it would probably cause a serious blow to the Quinn family. However, the act of faking the accident was also to protect Andrea's safety. As a well-informed upper-class noble, he had heard more than once about the miserable treatment of witches who fell into the hands of the church. After hesitating for a moment, he spoke his mind, but was interrupted by Andrea's sneer. Protect? As long as my father doesn't hand me over, what can the church do? Bring the judgment army into the inner city to arrest me? Andrea raised her voice. He's the prime minister of the King of Dawn and controls the outer city patrol, but he did nothing. Miss Nana's father was originally just a baron, but for the sake of his daughter, he rushed into the Lord's castle and argued with His Royal Highness face to face. But he only drove me out of my home. Is this also protection? Ao Tua was speechless. After a long silence, he asked hesitantly, will you go back? That day won't come. Andrea stood up. As I said, the eldest daughter of the Quinn family died 5 years ago. That's what my father wants to see. Oro goes to your grave every year to lay flowers. He still can't forget you. She walked to the door and whispered, that's just his wishful thinking. He'll forget you one day. Watching the two disappear from the room, Ao Tua lay on the bench powerlessly. He somewhat hated his cowardice. Even now, he was still bringing up Oro instead of expressing his true feelings. I can't forget you either. He closed his eyes. Chapter 436. Genius in a second to remember love go divided by small. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Roland learned from Anna that Tilly was about to celebrate her 20th birthday. Love go small say net only now did he remember that there was such a thing. He could not be blamed for being careless. The memories of the fourth prince were like a database to him, and he would only look through them when necessary. But there was too little content about current politics and occultism, and it was mostly about troublemaking experiences and self-satisfied pranks. Therefore, the frequency of him looking back on this memory was getting lower and lower. For the fourth prince, Tilly was a dark history, so the part she occupied was naturally insignificant. The content related to her was suppressed to the lowest level, as if he did not want to remember it at all. Tilly's birthday did not refer to the day of her awakening, but the literal day of her birth. Due to the special nature of the extraordinary, she did not even know when she had awakened as a witch, and every year during the months of demons, she would not feel the turning point of the magic bite on her body. Therefore, for her, her birthday was the only thing. After looking through this memory, Roland found that, probably because Tilly was the last child of the Queen, when Wimbledon III was still alive, he would hold a grand birthday celebration for her every winter in the inner city. Even the most favored Timothy had not received such treatment. But other than that, he rarely paid attention to Tilly, as if he did not care about her life. If not for this, the fourth prince would not have dared to bully his sister again and again. As he flipped further, he found something interesting. On the day of Tilly's coming of age, the scale of the celebration was also the largest, even the subsequent coming-of-age ceremonies could not compare. Not only did the 4 border guards rush to the capital, but there were also gifts from the Kingdom of Dawn, the Kingdom of Wolfheart, and the Kingdom of Everwinter. Even the Fjord Islands had sent emissaries. They wanted to teach Tilly a lesson and let her understand that she was not the kind of person her father liked. The reason why Wimbledon III had done this was just to make it up to the late Queen. His kindness to Tilly was just to comfort his mother in heaven. Regardless of whether Roland believed it or not, they believed it at the time. So, the two of them went to find Prince Roland and tried to instigate him to fight. However, ever since he was taught a harsh lesson by Tilly 8 years ago, he was no longer willing to provoke his seemingly quiet but rebellious sister. So, he refused to agree no matter what. Left with no choice, the two of them decided to do it themselves. Prince Roland did not know how exactly they did it, but the result was that a pair of bear cubs as a gift from the kingdom of Wolfheart were poisoned to death, which was also Tilly's favorite gift at that time. Seeing his sister holding the dead bear cubs in a daze, Prince Roland found a trace of pleasure in his heart. No wonder he was the scum of the royal family. Except for murder and arson, he really did all kinds of bad things. No matter what, this must be a terrible memory for Tilly Wimbledon. Love go small say net ko. After reading it, Roland quickly thought of what he should give her. He spread out a piece of white paper and began to draw his gift. What is this? Nightingale poked her head out from behind. A bear? Yes, a bear plushie, the kind that you can hug to sleep, Roland said with a smile. Based on his limited gift-giving experience, he knew that most girls had no resistance to cute and furry gifts, and a plushie of the same height could perfectly blend these 2 points. Of course, simple plushie production was not difficult for him, so it was not unusual. Since he was a prince and had the technical support of a group of witches, he could naturally make it more unique. On the day of Tilly's birthday, Roland came to her room with a gift. After knocking on the door, she was the only one in the room. When she saw him, she was slightly surprised. Why are you here? Today is your birthday. I will hold a sumptuous dinner in the castle tonight, Roland said with a smile. But before that, I have a gift for you. A gift? Tilly was slightly surprised. Is it the one in your arms? She turned her body sideways. Come in. It's a little big, but I promise it's very special. The prince wiped his forehead and put the gift on the floor of the living room. In this era, gifts between nobles were small and exquisite. From flowers to rings, they could be hidden in the gown in advance, and then taken out unexpectedly to give the other party a surprise. It was indeed rare to see a gift like him holding a wrapped cardboard box, and this thing was much heavier than he thought. You've never given me anything before. Tilly's tone was a little unpredictable. You were given a quill when you were born, Roland corrected her. Although it's not a precious gift. Well, it's a royal tradition in Greycastle. She shrugged. What about this? Can I open it? Of course. Roland smiled and sat beside her, watching her untie the ribbon little by little. When the cardboard box was put down, he heard her slightly gasp. What is this? Tilly blinked. A bear. Roland grinned. How can a bear look like this? She curiously circled the doll twice, and then could not help but touch it. It's so soft. Its skin was drawn by Soroya, and the template was the fur of a northern wolf cub. It was extremely smooth to the touch. As for the shape, Roland designed it completely according to the giant panda of the future. As an ancient species that could survive by acting cute, and was popular as a diplomatic gift around the world, its cuteness was evident. I've never heard of this kind of bear. Its color is too strange. Doesn't it look good? No, I mean. Tilly did not seem to know how to describe it, but her sparkling eyes revealed her inner thoughts. It's called a giant panda, and it's a widely loved animal. She quickly realized, this is from another world. Roland nodded. And it's not just a doll that can be hugged. Try pinching its neck. After Tilly did as she was told, the panda suddenly moved. Its legs moved back and forth, as if it wanted to climb onto Tilly's body. She covered her mouth in surprise and took 2 steps back. The doll did not stop after landing on all fours, but slowly crawled towards her. This was the reason why it was so heavy. Roland had implanted connecting rods and gears in its body that could move back and forth. Each of its limbs was driven by a small motor, and the motor was powered by the shrunken Dawn Eye. As the intensity of the magnetic flux was reduced, the duration of the enchantment was also greatly extended. When not in use, it could last for 3 to 4 months, but when used continuously, the duration would be reduced by about 20%. Even if Tilly returned to Sleeping Island, the panda would be able to accompany her for a long time. Pinch its neck again, and the doll will stop. Roland smiled. I hope you like this gift. This time, even if Tilly did not reply, he could see the answer from her expression. Chapter 437. Genius in a Second to Remember Love or Go Away. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Why did you want to give me this? After a while, Tilly put down the doll. Do you remember what happened when you were an adult? Roland said slowly. She pursed her lips. Did you do it? No, it was Timothy and Garcia. The prince told her about the past. But I'm also responsible. If I had told my father, none of this would have happened. You were beaten up by them. Tilly sighed. So it's normal that you didn't tell them. It won't happen again. I thought the extra memories in your head were all true knowledge and knowledge. She did not respond. Instead, she changed the topic. Now it seems that's not the case. Are there any other new things besides the panda? When he heard her roll up her tongue and mumble the unfamiliar syllable, Roland could not help but smile. Of course, there are many. If there's a chance, I can tell you slowly. Tilly was undoubtedly smart. He believed that she would understand him as long as he said half of his words. Sure enough, after a brief daze, she stared at Roland thoughtfully. At this time, Andrea's voice suddenly came from outside the door. Lady Tilly, I've brought you a present. Go away. I was the first one, okay? Then came Ash's voice. I was the first one. Roland laughed and stood up. A lot of unpleasant things have happened in the past, but they are in the past. I don't think we should be bound by our memories, whether it's me or you, Border Town or Sleeping Island. If you encounter any trouble in the future, you can come to me at any time. I'll always be your brother. He paused. Happy birthday, Tilly. He opened the door. The two witches were stunned and stared at each other. The prince smiled. Don't argue. I'm the first one. Otto felt lost as he walked down the street. Andrea's words still lingered in his ears. The eldest daughter of the Quinn family died 5 years ago. This is what father wants to see. He felt that this sentence was not correct. He wanted to refute it, but he did not know where to start. These days, in addition to observing Border Town, he spent the rest of his time wandering around the market, hoping to see her again, but ultimately to no avail. Otto walked to a stone bench by the side of the square, brushed away the snow on it, and slowly sat down. Although his thoughts were surging, he did not forget the purpose of his trip. Apart from the military camp, he had walked through every corner of the town and gained a comprehensive understanding of the place. For example, the townspeople's lives were not as well off as they had been in the beginning. Instead, they were no different from ordinary poverty. All these changes came from Lord Roland Wimbledon. Not only did he lead the people to repel the terrifying demonic beasts, but he also invented all kinds of magical machines and tools to improve everyone's lives. Otto witnessed the operation of the black machines in the mining area. 2 of them could do the work that dozens of people could do, and it was extremely easy. There were also the towering iron towers by the Redwater River, which were said to be able to deliver water to the homes of the residents. There were also the rapidly built city walls, residential areas, and docks. Nowadays, ditches were dug everywhere in the town, which seemed to be for the installation of more convenient heating equipment, so that the residents would no longer have to suffer from the cold. He could see such news on the bulletin board in the center of the square every day. What was even more shocking was that most of the townspeople could actually read the official documents posted there. The more he observed, the more incredible it was. The changes in Border Town were everywhere, and they were completely beyond his imagination. Otto opened his notebook, intending to write down today's new discoveries, but his hand holding the pen was suddenly grabbed. He looked up and found two patrolmen in black uniforms standing in front of him. "Are you Silvereye?" That was the fake name he used when he pretended to be a businessman. Otto responded calmly and looked around, only to find that there were also black uniforms on the other two sides of the square, but they did not approach, and their eyes were fixed on him. They were here for him. Otto's heart sank. He had thought that the patrolmen here were different from what he saw outside, and that they were very well behaved. He did not expect that he would get into trouble now. "What's the matter?" he asked coldly. There was no benefit in currying favor with these greedy people who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Even if it was blackmail, he could not allow them to open their mouths. If he could not get rid of them, he could only use his noble identity. However, the reply of the man in black was completely unexpected to Otto. "We received a report that you are suspected of spying. Now put your hands behind your back and act according to the instructions. If you have any intention of resisting, we can't guarantee your safety." Spy? What kind of reason is this? Do they want to find a scapegoat? I don't understand what you said at all. Otto shook off the man's arm. "I'm a noble from the Kingdom of Dawn, the Luashi family in the City of Glow." "I'm not." Just as he shook off the man's arm, he was suddenly punched in the abdomen. Most of his strength suddenly disappeared. A stream of acid flowed into his mouth, and his body involuntarily curled up. Then the two men pressed him down in the cold snow, and his hands were firmly tied together with a rope. "Noble? You said a few days ago that you were a merchant." One of them sneered. "I told you not to resist." The other man kicked him hard again. "You asked for it. A few days ago." Could it be that they had been watching him for a long time? That was impossible. At least in the first 2 days, no patrol team had noticed his whereabouts. Ahem. I'm indeed a noble. There are documents in my bag. Otto struggled, but the man did not budge. "Go and explain to Lord Carter." The two men lifted him up. "If you confess everything, you might be able to live." After a day in prison, Otto, hungry and thirsty, finally saw the man they had been talking about, Lord Carter. Before the man could speak, he grabbed the iron bars and poured out everything he knew. "I'm really Otto Luashi, from the City of Glow in the Kingdom of Dawn. I was entrusted by the King of Dawn to come to Grey Castle to seek allies against the Church. I'm not a spy like you said. I want to see your lord, His Highness Roland Wimbledon." He had long heard of the darkness in the prison. The patrol team often colluded with the rats and imprisoned some outsiders as scapegoats. If he was regarded as a lamb with no background, he was afraid that he would never have the chance to see the light of day again. The man was obviously stunned. "I haven't asked anything yet." He tilted his head. "What do you think?" To Otto's surprise, a woman emerged from the shadows. She was shrouded in a white robe, and her face was covered by a hood. But judging from her figure, she was no less beautiful than the flower of glow. "What he said is true," the woman said, spreading out her hands. "Really? So he's really a messenger from the Kingdom of Dawn?" Carter put his hand on his forehead. "It seems that we've caused trouble for His Highness again." Chapter 438. A genius in a second to remember love. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Otto finally met the legendary Prince Roland of Grey Castle. After confirming that he was indeed a noble of the Kingdom of Dawn, he was taken into the castle by Carter. Then the servants brought him toiletries, new clothes, and hot food. At the same time, Carter searched him from head to toe. This was probably the most rude reception Otto had ever seen. Prince Roland stayed in a room on the third floor of the castle facing the north. When he opened the door, the first thing he saw was a floor-to-ceiling window that took up half of the wall. The snowy scene behind made the room look very bright. Although the fireplace was not lit, the room was extraordinarily warm. The prince sat in front of a mahogany table, flipping through a black leather notebook in his hand. Otto found that it was his notebook. The official documents of the ambassador and the family seal were also on the side. It seemed that the hotel where he lived had been thoroughly searched. His hair color was the same as Timothy's, and his face was somewhat similar, but the feeling he gave off was very different. Whether it was his sitting posture or his expression, he seemed very casual, which somewhat matched the rumor that Prince Roland liked to do things his own way. When he saw Otto, he closed the notebook and smiled. "Are you the messenger from the Kingdom of Dawn? Please sit down." Otto bowed according to the etiquette of the nobles. No matter how badly the other party had behaved, he had to follow the etiquette. After all, Prince Roland might not care much if he was treated as a joke, but he represented the royal family of the Kingdom of Dawn. "I've taken a look at what you've written," the prince said with a smile. Some aspects are indeed recorded in detail, so it's not surprising that it was misunderstood. Besides, my subjects don't know where you come from. They enthusiastically reported you because of my order. Here, I apologize to you. Reported by subjects. Otto frowned slightly. However, no amount of explanation could absolve a noble from being rudely violated, not to mention that the other party was a person without a title. If it were not for the heavy responsibility on his shoulders, he would definitely ask His Highness to bring this person to justice. He suppressed the displeasure in his heart and said, "No, Your Highness, you are doing this for the stability of the territory, but this action may hurt those innocent outsiders. Most of them may not be able to produce documents to prove their identity like I did. You don't have to worry about that. The evidence collected by the Ministry of Justice has nothing to do with identity documents. We have a series of measures to ensure the innocence of the innocent." Prince Roland waved his hand. "What do they say?" "We don't wrongly accuse a good person, but we don't let go of a bad person either." At this point, he raised the corner of his mouth. "I've heard about how you were arrested. If you had followed their instructions, you wouldn't have suffered any harm. The process is somewhat rough, but it is also helpless. You must know that some of the most vicious people can pull out a weapon at any time in an attempt to fight back. Since the beginning of winter, 2 policemen in Border Town have been injured while trying to arrest them." Police. He was probably referring to the patrol members. What was the Ministry of Justice? Was it an organization that managed the patrol team? He suppressed the doubts in his heart. "Does this happen often?" "Once or twice a month," His Royal Highness spread out his hands and said, "It's probably because of the endless winter. Timothy is bored to death." Love goes small say Netku, he did not hide his hostility to the new king. Otto realized that the contradiction between the two sides was obviously irreconcilable. He hesitated for a moment and said, "When I passed by King's City, I heard some rumors among the people. Are you really going to push Timothy off the throne? Are the rumors saying that the new king's throne is in jeopardy?" Roland said bluntly. "Timothy shouldn't have touched the throne. In order to usurp power, he murdered his father, framed his eldest brother, and drove his third sister out of Greycastle. The entire southern territory was destroyed by the flames of war, and the people lost their homes. These are all crimes he has committed. Only by overthrowing him can Greycastle regain its former prosperity." Otto was a little stunned. Roland and Wimbledon's reaction was even worse than the new king's. At least in terms of determination to fight, Timothy was far less active. The positions and momentum of the two seemed to have been reversed. He cleared his throat and continued, "In this case, as a friendly neighbor of the Kingdom of Dawn, I hope that Greycastle can regain its stability as soon as possible. This time, I came with the covenant of the King of Dawn, His Majesty Degan Moya." "Oh." The prince said with great interest, "Where is it?" "To avoid leaking the news, I didn't bring Wen Han with me, but His Majesty granted me the right to sign it myself." Otto repeated the offensive and defensive alliance agreement given by the King of Dawn. If the two countries can work together, we can effectively contain the attack of the Church and avoid repeating the mistakes of the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart. That's it? The prince's response surprised him. What did he mean by, that's it? He had clearly made it very clear. When he was about to repeat it, Roland shook his head and said, "This plan may not work. The Church's determination to annex the four kingdoms is much stronger than you think. Coupled with the outstanding God's punishment army and witches, your so-called troops stationed at the border will probably be surrounded and destroyed by the enemy before they can set off." God's punishment army and witches? Otto was surprised. It seems that you know nothing about the ambition of the Church. Prince Roland took a sip of tea and said, "I'll tell you all the information I know, and I hope you can bring it back to the Kingdom of Dawn so that the king can re-examine this covenant. If we want to defeat the Church, what we need to do is not deterrence, but an all-out attack." The meeting did not end until the evening. When the prince put down his teacup, the field and forest behind him had become dark. The room lit up with a strange light, brighter and purer than candlelight, but Otto was not in the mood to pay attention to it. He felt the cold sweat on his back soaking his clothes. His fingers unconsciously clenched into fists, and his palms were slippery. His mind was filled with His Highness's words. Using wild witches to create extraordinary warriors, secretly training combat witches, pure witches, and the purpose of the Church to destroy the four kingdoms at all costs was to prepare for the coming Doomsday War. These pieces of news were simply too unimaginable. But many details matched with the information he had learned, such as the pill of madness used by the Church to weaken the resistance of the four kingdoms, the continuous collection of female orphans in carriages to the Holy City, and their attitude toward the defeated nobles. If it was to completely erase the influence of the nobles and achieve a complete unification of the Church and the kingdom, everything made sense. I can't make a decision," Otto stammered. "These things are too important. I have to report to His Majesty." "Of course, this concerns the life and death of the two kingdoms," the prince said calmly. "We can't be too careful. But don't forget, we don't have much time left." When he was about to leave, Otto walked to the door and turned back hesitantly. "Your Highness, I heard that a group of witches has been recruited in Border Town. I wonder if you've heard of the name Andrea." "Ah, she used to be a noble of the Kingdom of Dawn. Unfortunately, she was stranded in Greycastle." The prince raised his eyebrows. "Why, do you know her?" "Yes." Otto's heart skipped a beat. "Can you let me see her?" The prince nodded. "I can arrange it for you, but it's up to her whether she will see you or not." "Isn't Andrea your?" He shook his head with a smile. "The witches are just people who live here, not my servants. I can't control their thoughts." Chapter 439. A genius in a second to remember if you like it. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. After Ottolosai left the office, Nightingale's voice came from beside him. What he said wasn't all true, especially about his experience before coming to Border Town. It's not strange, he must have arrived in King's City first, and after negotiating with Timothy, he turned to the Western Territory. Roland smiled. "If he had come straight to me from the beginning, then it would be strange. Diplomats like to bet on both sides. If it were me, I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket." "You mean, they won't necessarily be on our side?" "At least not right away." He fetched a pot of hot water and refilled the teacup. "How much do you think the King of Dawn will believe after receiving this information?" Nightingale was stunned for a long time. "I don't know." "I don't know either." As soon as Roland finished speaking, he was pinched on the shoulder. "But one thing is obvious. This information sounds terrible, but it will happen several years later. We can't even give an exact date. However, the threat of the Church is right in front of us. Perhaps they will take action at the beginning of spring. Therefore, the King of Dawn will not side with us because of this information. In all likelihood, he will continue to watch from the sidelines until the winner between me and Timothy is decided. If he has the strength to spare, he may even give benefits to both sides in order to seek for future returns. This was also a common tactic of politicians. They were unwilling to take too many risks and preferred to reap benefits in a stable way, especially when it came to investment projects with high returns like war. If there were no demons, Roland would not be averse to deep contact with them. He would lay a trap for them to jump into and then collect more debts with interest. But now he was not in the mood to play this kind of diplomatic game with the other side. In the next year, Border Town must take the initiative to attack and quickly stabilize the situation. A storm was about to sweep through, and the fish that were still fighting for food in the pond could only die. Then, will you tell them the information? Nightingale was puzzled. At least the Kingdom of Dawn is not our real enemy. I don't know how much the nobles will believe about the demons, but they will definitely spread the news about the church's ambition, which will weaken the foundation of the church's rule, Roland explained. Once they lose the support of the people, it will not be easy for the church to quickly use the kingdom's resources. Although he had told Otto all the information he knew, in fact, he only revealed the part about the existence of demons to Otto. He did not tell Otto about the Witch Empire and the first 2 battles of divine will. The former was even more unbelievable than the existence of the demons, and it might even have the opposite effect, because most of the people were hostile to witches. This kind of thing might be twisted into a witches' conspiracy, with just a little guidance. The latter could easily destroy people's confidence to fight against demons. If they failed in the first 2 times, what chance did they have? In short, the seeds of cooperation against the enemy had been sown. As for whether they could reap results, it all depended on the reaction of the Kingdom of Dawn. 3 days later, Roland met Ottoloshi again. From the disappointment in his eyes, he could guess the answer to the meeting. I prefer to form an alliance with you. But compared to discussing the details of the alliance, the most important thing now is to send the news back to the Kingdom of Dawn as soon as possible. He put his hand on his chest and bowed. So I'm here to bid you farewell. I hope to hear good news from you. Roland nodded. By the way. Your Highness. Otto hesitated for a moment. I have a presumptuous request. What is it? Please take care of Andrea Quinn for me. Andrea is a witch of Sleeping Island. You should ask Tilly Wimbledon instead of me. Roland sighed and agreed. Standing at the top of the castle, Andrea faced the howling cold wind and looked to the south, where the Redwater River flowed. Aren't you going to the dock? Hiding behind an invisible barrier, Shavy shivered in the cold. I heard that he's going to leave on a ship soon. As his childhood playmate, it's only right for me to send him off. It's the same here. She let out a long sigh. I heard from Ashes that he can't forget you. Only 1 out of 10 of her words can be trusted, Andrea said grumpily. She even praised him in front of Lady Tilly for being so consistent. A dog's mouth can never utter ivory. Is that so? Shavy's teeth chattered. That's right. She snorted and then looked at Andrea, who was curled up into a ball. If you feel cold, you can go down first. You can come back to pick me up later. It's okay. I'll wait for you here. Shavy shook her head. Anyway, if I catch a cold, Miss Lily will treat me. I can take a couple of days off and play a few more games of cards. Andrea gave her a thumbs up, and then shifted her gaze to the Redwater River. In the drifting snowflakes, she vaguely saw the raised sails, and a red dot swaying slightly at the top of the mast. That was the signal to set sail. That's good, she thought. Time will dilute everything. Forgetting is a better result for everyone. Andrea was not completely unaware of Otto's feelings, but she still chose to avoid it. Regardless of whether it was him or Ordecat, with their status in the family, they could easily marry a more suitable woman instead of wasting their time on a witch. As one of the 3 most prominent noble families in the city of Glow, such a relationship was bound to be fruitless. Besides, she was not willing to return to the place that had abandoned her. Not seeing him was the best choice. Goodbye, my friend, Andrea thought. The faintly discernible sail soon disappeared at the end of her vision. After the messenger's matter came to an end, Roland immediately threw himself into the construction of Border Town. Now, the water supply, heating, and power supply project had officially started. The 3 pipelines were all buried underground and led directly to each residential area. Since the residential buildings had been designed with openings in mind, the entry part was very simple. The key was the location of the boiler and the water tower. Chapter 440. According to the construction plan, Roland arranged an equipment room at each well point to accommodate all the equipment needed for the 3 connections for ease of management. The whole set of equipment included a steam engine, an electric motor, a power supply, a boiler, and 2 water tanks. Together with the water tower outside the room, the whole 3-connection system was formed. The steam engine was responsible for pumping the water from the well to the water tower and the water tank. The former was mainly used for domestic water supply, while the latter was used for heating water for the boiler. The first-level water tank was higher than the ground, with limestone and washing stones suspended in it to soften the water by precipitating magnesium and calcium ions in the water. The purified water would be directed to the second-level water tank, which was located lower, and any floating objects in the water would be blocked by Soroya's special filter mesh. The water supply to the boiler was done by the electric motor. When the internal water level was too low, the float valve would be activated, and the electric motor would start to pump water until the water level returned to normal. This process was much more stable than adding water manually or using the steam engine, and it also eliminated the need for people to observe at all times. Since the water supply and heating system had been verified in advance, there was naturally no difficulty in the construction. The key was the power supply system, which was the first time for the town. Neither Carr nor the other members of the Mason Guild knew anything about electricity, so Roland planned to make a small model in the yard first, and then explain it to the Ministry of Construction after it was successful. After all, he did not know much about electricity, and his knowledge of circuits was basically at the high school level. With a reliable and stable power supply, the first step should be to create a qualified electrical equipment, namely, a light bulb. Thinking of this, Roland put on a thick coat and set out for the backyard of North Slope Mountain. Traveling through the mist of Nightingale, it took him only 3 or 4 minutes to reach the destination, which should have taken a quarter of an hour. When he opened the wooden door, Anna and Lucia immediately noticed him, but Anna was busy with her work and only nodded at him, while Lucia ran to him happily. "Your Highness, good morning." "Good morning." Roland nodded with a smile, then walked to Anna and asked, "What are you busy with?" "A new barrel and locking mechanism." She pointed to several long steel barrels on the table seriously. "Your drawings are a bit unreasonable, so I think it would be better to make some changes." Roland could not help but reach out to touch her head, but she shook her head and refused. He seemed to have seen this scene somewhere before. He coughed twice, restrained his teasing mood, and said, "Well, do it your way." Roland did not mind her questioning his design. After all, he had deduced the gun blueprint based on the theory. It was normal for there to be mistakes and room for improvement. Moreover, Anna's learning talent and comprehension ability were far better than his. He felt that one day, her understanding of knowledge would reach a level that even he could not reach. After a while, Anna put down the parts in her hands, walked to Roland. "Ah." Roland could not help but be surprised. Is she going to make up for the previous touch? He tried to rub her soft hair, and Anna raised her head in satisfaction. "Do you have something new you want to try out?" "Ah, yes." The prince looked at Lucia. "How is the separation of the messy ores in the mine going?" "It's basically done. The results are all here." Lucia handed him a stack of books. "But I'm afraid it will take a long time to test the mixing of the ores with the steel, because there are too many simple elements that have been separated." "It's already very good to be able to do this," Roland said approvingly. This was also an extension of the material improvement plan. Compared with the previous control of the carbon content and the elimination of impurities to obtain high-quality steel, the elements involved now had expanded to the resources that the entire North Slope mine could provide. There were not many tricks in this part of the content, but only a little bit of experimentation. Roland spread out the books, checked the characteristics of the various unknown minerals in the yard, and soon found the element with the highest melting point. He pointed to the column marked Test Item Number 12. "Where is this ore?" Lucia immediately found the test samples, which were sealed in a transparent coating bag. One was a raw stone, and the other was a bag of decomposed elementary particles. As for the black raw stone, Roland felt that he had seen it somewhere before. "Wait, isn't it the same as the black stone that was sent to my office before?" Ever since he handed it over to the alchemist, he had forgotten about it and never paid attention to it again. But it turned out to be the mineral with the highest melting point in the North Slope mountain. In the record book, Anna could not accurately mark the specific value of the melting point, so she could only use words to describe it. Between ordinary, high, and relatively high, only its characteristics were written as extremely high. As for the bag of elementary particles, they were silver-white like most of the metal elements, and there was nothing different about them. "Is this thing tungsten?" "But it doesn't matter, as long as it is difficult to melt." Roland asked Anna to process it into a very fine metal wire, twist it into a spiral shape, and fix it on the glass shelf. Then, he put the shelf into the glass bulb, and the main part of the electric lamp was completed. Of course, there were still 2 steps to make it stable, and this was also the most difficult part of the lamp technology. The first step was to vacuum it to prevent oxygen from reacting with the filament, and the second was to seal it to prevent air from entering the lamp. Without a doubt, these 2 steps could only be done by witches. The first thing Roland did was to find Agatha. The main reason for vacuum was that the filament would become extremely active under high temperature, and it was easy to oxidize and produce new oxides, which would cause the filament to melt. To achieve this effect, filling the filament with non-reactive gas would be equally effective, or even better. And pure nitrogen was an excellent filler. Using the principle that nitrogen was lighter than air, a simple downward exhaust method could easily fill the lamp with nitrogen, which was much simpler than the vacuum step. When nitrogen was also discharged from the other end, and Soroya was responsible for sealing it, a simple incandescent lamp was completed. Looking at the palm-sized electric lamp in his hand, Roland's heart was filled with emotion. This thing, which had been eliminated in the future, now represented the highest level of production in Border Town. The next night, he summoned all the members of the city hall to the front yard of the castle, and at the same time ordered the guards to extinguish the torches in the yard. In the snowy night, when dusk covered everything, Roland turned off the switch of the circuit. In an instant, an orange-yellow light lit up in the center of the courtyard. It was not like a candle that would be extinguished in the cold wind, nor was it like a bonfire that flickered. The illumination range was not large, only about a few meters, but the stable light in the wind was something that people had never seen before. At this time, there was no need for any explanation. The people's unblinking expressions and the quiet scene explained everything. Chapter 441. Brother Vader, is this really okay? Firehead touched his clothes uneasily. Chief Knight said that the uniform is a symbol of our identity. We have to wear it neatly when we're on duty. And we'll be punished if we get it dirty, not to mention that we're not wearing it at all. Whistle kept looking around as if he was afraid of being seen by his peers. Don't be long-winded. Wearing it is enough of a symbol. If you stand in the snow in midwinter, people will know that there are policemen hundreds of steps away. How can you arrest people then? Vader spat. You're from Border Town, right? Yes. At the mention of this, both of them suddenly became spirited. My father is a hunter who used to live in the old street. He's very skilled. He can even shoot a fox in the neck with an arrow. Me too. My father always says that hunting is not stable and that it's better to go mining. He even prepared a hoe for me. If His Highness hadn't become the Lord, I'm afraid I would have to stay in the mine. I can see that. Vader shrugged. Only the children of a hunter's family would have such a strange nickname. Since you're from Border Town, you should be more concerned about the order of the town than an outsider like me, right? Even I'm not afraid of punishment. What are you afraid of? Is it more important than upholding the rules set by His Highness? This. The two hesitated for a moment and then said as if they had made up their minds, "You're right. Brother Vader, you're not an outsider anymore. Haven't you already got your ID card?" His Highness said that those who get this card are all his subjects, Whistle muttered. Vader smiled and said no more. He continued to stare at the row of caves on the east side of the temporary area. It had been nearly 3 months since he became a policeman and he had completely adapted to life in the western region. He originally thought that the patrols would have nothing to do without extortion or fraud, but he didn't expect that they would be so busy every day. The police were needed to receive refugees, deal with civil disputes, and even catch those vicious criminals and spies. Apart from fighting demonic beasts, the First Army didn't interfere with the security operations in Border Town at all. This was very different from what he had expected. In Valencia, the patrol team was more or less a supplement to the city guards. They had to do some of the dirty and tiring work, but they did not get many benefits. That was why many members of the patrol team were used to looking for extra money. But in Border Town, the police and the First Army were more like separate systems, the former for internal affairs, while the latter for external affairs. What made Vader even more astonished was that apart from the direct orders from their superiors, their targets were actually reported by the citizens. That's right, the townspeople had changed Vader's view of ordinary people. These lazy and stupid people would actually take the initiative to keep an eye on suspicious people and report them to City Hall. Every time a foreign merchant ship arrived in town, the Ministry of Justice would receive 5 or 6 such reports. Very quickly, Vader realized the enormous power contained within. No spy could completely avoid contact with the outside world or completely blend in with the natives the moment they arrived at a certain place, unless they had grown up in that place. When everyone became a vigilant sentry post, what enemy could hide themselves? Of course, not every capture would yield results. For example, the sneaky person they caught the last time turned out to be a noble of the Kingdom of Dawn. Vader was prepared to be punished, but there was no response from the higher-ups, as if they had turned a blind eye to his beating of a noble. This further strengthened his view. "Gold has appeared," Firehead exclaimed in a low voice. "Don't worry about him. Just pretend to sweep the snow," Vader said calmly. "He didn't bring any goods. He's just here to investigate the situation." Gold was the code name of the target. 2 days ago, the Ministry of Justice received a report that serfs were smuggling grain. Lord Carter attached great importance to the matter and immediately assigned the task to Vader, asking him to catch both the person and the goods, calling it a gold hunt. However, the task did not proceed smoothly. After some inquiries, they initially locked on to the target. 5 or 6 people took turns to monitor the temporary residential area for 2 days, but in the end, they did not even find a trace of the target. Vader was clear that the reason for the lack of progress was that the police uniforms were too conspicuous here. He had lived in the Western District for a long time before, so he naturally knew that as long as a City Hall official appeared, the news would quickly spread. The Eastern District was not much better. The people living here were all serfs, and their black uniforms were as eye-catching as fireflies in the night sky. Therefore, he simply persuaded Firehead and Whistle to take off their uniforms, put on a tattered coat, and disguise themselves as snow sweepers, blocking the main road between the Eastern District and Border Town. As long as there was a suspicious person passing by, it would definitely not escape their eyes. After circling around the Eastern District, Gold returned to the cave. However, when it reappeared, it was carrying a large cloth bag on its back. "He really is smuggling wheat." Whistle clenched his fist. "Damn it, he simply doesn't care about His Highness's words," Firehead said angrily. "Let's arrest him now." "Don't worry." Vader waved his hand. Didn't Lord Carter say that we want both the person and the goods to be caught? We'll act in 3 groups. Vader ordered according to the previous plan to trap the rats. Firehead, you set off now and first go to the area around the old city wall. If he wants to enter the inner city, there's only one way for him to go. Okay. Next, I'll follow him. This requires a certain level of skill, so I'm the most suitable. He licked his lips. Finally, whistle. Keep a distance of about 100 steps from me, and slowly keep an eye on him. Just don't make eye contact with Gold. Got it. Then let's begin. Although the 3 of them did not have a hierarchy, they still obeyed Vader's instructions. Vader shouldered the broom and calmly walked 3 or 4 steps in front of Gold. According to his past experience, following from behind would easily arouse the target's vigilance. However, if he were to lead the way, in front, it would greatly reduce the target's vigilance. If he could roughly figure out the area the target wanted to go to, this kind of accompanying method was the most reliable. His attention was completely focused on Gold. As long as there was even the slightest change in the other party's footsteps, he was confident that he could pounce on him within a few breaths. After passing through the gap in the old city wall, Gold stopped and leaned against a corner of the street to rest. Obviously, the other party also knew that if he continued to walk towards the center of the town, the chances of encountering the police would greatly increase. Vader took a few more steps forward and turned into a fork in the road, waiting for the buyer to appear. Not long after, a townsman pushing a small cart appeared. Similarly, he looked left and right for a while before slowly making his way to the side of the serf. After opening the cloth bag and inspecting it, the townsman took out a handful of coins from his bosom. At the same time, Vader gestured for them to take action. The 3 of them rushed towards the target from 3 different directions. The traitor was immediately dumbfounded and stood rooted to the ground, not knowing what to do. Chapter 442. When Roland learned of this matter, he was studying the layout of the residential area's power grid. After listening to Carter's report, he put down his quill and sighed. Although he knew that such a day would inevitably come, he still felt a little helpless when it really happened. After all, the ban on selling grain privately had been repeatedly announced, but there were still people who would take the risk for a little money. Obviously, this was the first case of this kind, so it was natural to give a heavy sentence. In addition, he had to improve all kinds of laws as soon as possible, and then recruit specialized law officers to interrogate and judge the case. After all, after the city was built, there would only be more and more crimes, and he had no time to act as a judge all day long. The trial was finally decided to be held in the castle hall. Roland also summoned Berev, the director, to the castle to jointly try the grain smuggling crime. In the hall, 2 arrested suspects were kneeling on the ground, pale and with dull eyes. It seemed that they had never experienced such a scene. After Roland sat in the main seat, he cleared his throat and said, "Tell me everything you have done. Any concealment or lies will add to your crimes." Yes, sir." The 2 of them seemed to wake up from a dream and scrambled to tell the story of the grain trafficking. The serf, in particular, almost shouted himself hoarse, "His Royal Highness, Sir Lord. I know I am guilty, but if I don't sell the wheat, I really can't live. Those officials didn't buy the wheat according to your requirements, and I had no choice but to do so." The whole case was very simple, and halfway through, Roland had already sorted out the clues. In order to calm people's hearts, the city hall set a grain purchase limit that was slightly higher than the actual consumption, so there would always be a small amount of wheat left for the townspeople who bought the maximum amount every month. Parker, who lived in the 6th residential area, seized a business opportunity. He ground the extra wheat into coarse flour, mixed it with some wild vegetables he picked himself, made it into fragrant pancakes, and sold them in the market. As a result, he found that they sold well. This was also another major function of the convenience market, which limited the trading to staple foods, while the chickens, ducks, and eggs raised by the townspeople could be sold at their own stalls. This business could bring him several silver royals every month, but there was only so much wheat left. If he wanted to expand, he had to be frugal. So Parker set his sights on the serfs who did not sell all the grain to the city hall. After several inquiries, he contacted Gold, and then there was this smuggling case. But the serf's last sentence made Roland frown. What did he mean by the officials didn't buy wheat according to the regulations? Was it related to the city hall? He looked at Berev, who leaned over and whispered, "The Ministry of Agriculture is in charge of the acquisition, and the minister is Sirius Daly. It's unlikely that he would make such a mistake. You can call him over and ask him." Roland nodded and had the guards summon the Minister of Agriculture to the castle. Sirius Daly quickly arrived at the hall. After making a standard knight's salute, he inquired about His Highness' orders. He still had the demeanor of a former Wolf family knight. The prince explained the unclear parts of the case. "Did you refuse to buy serfs' food?" "Reporting to your highness, the situation is like this," Sirius answered without the slightest hesitation. "In accordance with your instructions, after the bumper harvest, we did not stop the purchase work, but gradually reduced the purchase price according to the quality of the wheat. In the first 2 months, the price was almost the same as the original price." He paused for a moment, then continued, "However, after winter, most of the serfs lacked suitable storage space, coupled with the fact that they moved from the original shantytowns to the temporary residential area. The quality of the wheat declined significantly. When we purchase, we can often find damp, discolored, moldy food, so the price is 20 to 30% lower than at the beginning. Most of this serf's food has been damp and moldy, and it is almost impossible to continue to store it. Therefore, the price I offered is 20% of the harvest price. 20% is no different from not buying, Your Highness." The serf shouted, "I've been working in the fields for a year, and the things I've grown can only be sold at this price. It's even more ruthless than the Black Street. Didn't you say that the price of grain would remain unchanged?" "That's referring to paying on time, idiot." Berev scolded in displeasure, "Do you think no one knows your real purpose for hoarding wheat? If there is a problem with the town's food supply, I'm afraid you can sell it at 3 or 4 times the original price." At this point, the case was completely clear, but the result made Roland slightly surprised. He had originally thought that it was just a simple case of smuggling grain, but he did not expect that it would involve a case of black-hearted food. Parker clearly knew that the quality of this batch of grain was poor, but he still agreed to buy it multiple times at 50% of the original price. It was likely that he did not care whether the moldy wheat was edible or not. What the serfs had committed was undoubtedly a felony, but the sentence given by the townsman Parker made it somewhat difficult for Roland to make a decision. He had heard from Scroll about the lives of the poor. When these people lacked food, let alone moldy black bread, even tree trunks and grass could be used to satisfy their hunger. It was precisely because of this that Scroll repeatedly emphasized how great it was to be able to let all the subjects eat wheat. Parker was also a poor person before, so he probably did not realize that using inferior grain to make wheat cakes was a crime. After discussing with Berev for a moment, Roland finally made a verdict. He stood up, looked around, and said in a deep voice, "I pronounce, 2 guilty." The serfs violated the ban by selling grain privately and knowingly. Their crime is 1 level higher and they are sentenced to 10 years of mine labor. If their subsequent performance is good, the length of service may be reduced at their discretion. Parker, a resident of the town, also violated the ban by using inferior wheat to make pancakes and selling them to other townsmen. Both crimes are punished together. In addition to 10 years of labor, a fine of 3 times the profit from the pancakes will be imposed. The above sentence will be carried out immediately. The 2 people's bodies went limp and they involuntarily collapsed to the ground. The guards standing at the side immediately came forward and dragged them out of the hall. The prince then ordered Sirius, "Write this matter into a notice and give it to Berev to review and publicize it. I want all the subjects to understand the cause and effect of this case and prevent such things from happening again." "Yes, Your Highness." After the trial was over, Roland called Chief Knight Carter to his office. "I heard that the arresting person this time is Vader again." Carter nodded. But this time they went a little overboard. They took off their police uniforms and went to arrest people. In the process, they were even reported by the people as fighting. I'll give him a warning. That won't be necessary. In fact, you should praise him, Roland said while stroking his chin. Isn't this a plainclothes policeman? He knows how to be flexible and has experience in arresting criminals. He used to be a patrol member and has a good understanding of the forces of the Blackstreet. He's simply a natural talent for supervision. Chapter 443. In the secret chamber of the Tower of Babel in the Hermes Cathedral. Taifun looked at the witch in front of him and could not help but sigh. Does His Excellency Maine really have no time? Of course. The witch stroked her golden curly hair. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent me to attend the meeting. Let me introduce myself. I'm Isabella, a pure witch of His Holiness. Sir Taifun, this. The other two new bishops, Soli Dal from the Judgment Army and El from the Arbitral Tribunal, looked at each other in dismay. Although they knew that the church had a group of secret witches, they did not expect that they could also participate in such a high-level meeting. She's a direct subordinate of the Pope. Her position is equal to that of a bishop, but she doesn't hold any actual position in the church, Taifun explained helplessly. In addition, bishops can also have their own pure witches. After this year's months of demons, you can choose a few witches to train. I see. Soli's eyes widened. Then, what kind of abilities do they have? This is top secret. Only His Holiness knows. Why do we train witches? El looked quite dissatisfied. If the believers find out, the reputation of the church may be seriously affected. Of course, it's to help you complete some shady tasks. Isabella raised her eyebrows. Apart from that, I can also accompany you to sleep, vent my anger, or play some other tricks. You know, the taste of a witch is incomparable to that of an ordinary woman. Ridiculous. Ahem, that's enough. Taifun coughed twice. Sir L, I said that the pure witch of the Pope is equal to the bishop. As an agent, she can even be regarded as His Holiness himself. You should know the most basic manners. And Lady Isabella, please don't make such a joke. They're not like an old man with one foot in the coffin. I won't take it seriously when I'm angry. As you wish, my lord, Isabella said with a smile. Humph, El snorted and ignored her. Then let's get down to business first. Taifun stroked his beard. Do you have anything to report? I don't understand why His Holiness Maine suddenly asked all the churches to escort the captured witches back to the Holy City. Even if it's just for transforming the God's punishment army, we've already paid a heavy price. El was the first to speak. Probably because she was angry at the pure witch, her tone was rather stiff. Since this order was issued, we have captured a total of 3 witches. However, during the secret escort, one of them escaped from the cage and killed all the escorts. We still haven't found her whereabouts. No collar? Asked Soli. Not all churches are equipped with the most advanced God's locket of retribution, El said angrily. Because of this witch, we lost 16 believers, 4 of whom were judgment warriors. If this kind of thing happens a few more times, I'm afraid everyone will be afraid of capturing witches. However, we all know that combat witches are only a small part of the population. Most of the fallen don't have the ability to resist, so this kind of thing is bound to be uncommon. Isabella said in a relaxed tone, and every time you bring back a wild witch, there may be 2 more scourge for the church. I don't think I need to elaborate on which one is more important, do I? I agree with Lady Isabella. Soli nodded. Now that the Hermes defense line is under increasing pressure, we urgently need more God's punishment army to fight against the demonic beasts. A God's punishment army is enough to replace 3 or 4 judgment warriors on the battlefield, not to mention the reserve army. Since His Holiness has made a decision, we just need to carry it out. Taifun turned to Soli Dal and asked, how's the situation in the defense line? Very difficult. The ordinary hybrids are easy to deal with, but the fearful beasts of hell are difficult. Every time they appear, a scourge will be injured or sacrificed. Soli shook his head. The method of burying snow powder in advance and then detonating it is good, but we can't guarantee that it will pass over the snow powder every time. His Holiness has also considered this, Isabella said bluntly. He plans to use the siege beasts in advance. What's that? A kind of siege weapon controlled by a pure witch. Its range, accuracy, and power are far better than that of a catapult, and it's also the trump card to conquer the kingdom of Wolfheart. The pure witch explained, the siege beasts are originally used to deal with demons and giant demonic beasts. Since the fearful beasts of hell have appeared in advance, it should be dragged out of the pivotal secret area. Why didn't we use it from the beginning? Soli was puzzled. Because of the wear and tear. Isabella shrugged. We can't build a new one, so we can only repair it locally. Then where did it come from? Elle asked with a frown. This is confidential. You have no right to know. You. Seeing that there was a silence in the secret room, Taifun clapped his hands and broke the silence. Well, since all of you have brought us bad news, let me share a piece of good news. Except for a few cities in the kingdom of Wolfheart that are still resisting, the nobles in the other places have already surrendered to us, just like those fence-sitters in the kingdom of Everwinter. More and more believers have joined the church. By next summer, the holy city's various resource income will double, and so will the scale of the Judgment Army. In addition, the Kingdom of Dawn has also caused a riot due to the wanton expulsion of believers. My people are secretly helping them fight against the suppressed nobles. It's estimated that they can hold on until the end of the months of demons. Finally, there's some positive news. Elle exhaled a white breath. I thought the church was finished just now. What nonsense are you talking about? Soli glared at her. Aren't we progressing steadily according to the plan? Well done. Isabella nodded approvingly. She then glanced at the three people one by one. Since you've finished, I'll explain the new decree of His Holiness. The three archbishops immediately looked at the pure witch. His Holiness wants to adjust the direction of attack next year. The priority will be to capture Grey Castle, and the Kingdom of Dawn will be the last. What? Soli Dal was startled. But all the previous plans were made for the Kingdom of Dawn, including the mobilization of materials and supplies. If we change the plan now, I'm afraid the date of attack will be greatly delayed. Wasn't this the order planned by Lord O'Brien when he was in power? Why do we need to change it now? Elle was also very puzzled. The two kingdoms will be destroyed sooner or later. Is it necessary to pay attention to who comes first? Taifun did not say anything. When His Holiness Maine asked him to send the pure witches to Grey Castle to make arrangements for the western region, he had a premonition of this change. His Holiness's intention was not in the king's city of Grey Castle, but in the border area. After the two people stopped talking, he said in a low voice, I have no opinion on the decree itself, but it does involve a lot of things. Before implementing it, I want to see His Holiness Maine. I wonder if you can pass on the message for me. Chapter 444. Taifun felt an inexplicable chill as he walked down the stone steps of the sinkhole. At the bottom of this quiet and deep church was the church's most important secret, the Hermes mechanism. It was the first time he had set foot in this place. Did His Holiness Maine really let me come here to see him? According to convention, only the Archbishop who was regarded as the successor of the Pope was qualified to enter the pivotal secret mechanism. He was too old to take over Maine's position. You've served the church for so many years and worked together, so His Holiness trusts you very much, Isabella said with a smile. Moreover, the past rules are not suitable for the upcoming war. The will of God should not be buried underground. It needs to be revealed to all the lost believers and lead us to the final challenge. This is His Holiness's idea. Yes, she said softly. After entering the mechanism, two Judgment Army soldiers came to greet him. Your Excellency, His Holiness is presiding over the magic stone experiment. If you have a God's stone of retaliation with you, please hand it over to me for the time being. It may affect the operation of magic power. Taifun nodded and handed a God's stone necklace to them. His Holiness is here. Please follow me. Isabella turned into a long passage and pushed open the iron door at the end. With a harsh squeak, Taifun saw another pure witch with her face covered. She blocked the door like a ghost. Her white skin could be seen under the black veil that wrapped her body. It seemed that she was naked except for the veil. The most eye-catching thing was the witch's eyes, which were different from ordinary people's pupils. Her eyes were a dull silver gray and there seemed to be a whirlpool spinning in them. If one looked at them for a long time, they would be sucked in. Taifun lowered his head subconsciously. Only then did he notice that the witch was not wearing shoes. Instead, her feet were covered with a bright red dot on each of her well-proportioned toes. The bishop could not help but think of the saying, the taste of a witch is incomparable to that of an ordinary woman. Damn it, are these witches all goblins? He quickly moved his slender feet away and heard Isabella's reminder. Your Excellency. Ahem. Taifun collected his thoughts and walked into the house. The room wasn't big, and the rosin torches hanging on the walls were burning vigorously, but he didn't smell the familiar sweet fragrance. 4 pure witches sat around a stone table, fiddling with a pile of glittering and translucent stones. Beside the stone table stood the current pope, His Holiness Maine. Taifun was just about to kneel and kowtow when Maine caught his arm. There are no outsiders here, so there's no need to be so formal, he said with a smile. We are old acquaintances, Lord Taifun. It had only been 2 months since they last met, but Maine's forehead already had a few more wrinkles, and there were a few strands of silver in his hair. However, his tone was still as familiar as before, without the slightest arrogance. You can't do that. Taifun suddenly felt a surge of warmth in his heart. Even if there are no other believers, I have to follow the order of the church. And what I said is order. The Pope smiled disapprovingly. Let's not talk about this. How's the situation up there? I originally planned to ask Isabella to convey your message, but since you're here, tell me about it. Yes, Your Holiness. Taifun nodded. After describing the current situation of the church, he talked about the last order Isabella mentioned. Right now, we're preparing resources for the Kingdom of Dawn. I'm afraid it will take a lot of effort to mobilize them again. Why did you suddenly decide to attack Grey Castle first? That's the main reason I called you here. Maine sighed. Grey Castle is now showing signs of decline. The order for the selection of Crown Prince and the Pill of Madness have achieved the desired effect, and the Kingdom of Dawn is in civil strife. Their destruction is only a matter of time, so it doesn't make much difference who attacks first. I think so too, but Grey Castle is still a huge opponent. There are 2 main reasons why I decided to change the attack plan, the Pope said slowly with his hands clasped behind his back. The first reason is basically the same as your concern. Grey Castle has the largest territory and the richest resources. It's a huge enemy, but it also means a huge reward. If we can convert it into the territory of the Church soon, the benefits will be much greater than occupying the Kingdom of Dawn. If we had 10 years, I would definitely carry out the plan set by Lord O'Brien, but we don't have much time. The appearance of the fearful beast of hell means that the bloody moon may appear much closer than the date mentioned in the Holy Book. At this time, it's worth taking some risks and making more sacrifices. Taifun nodded slightly. This reason was indeed good, but the problem was, it did not seem like Maine's style. Then your second reason is? Roland Wimbledon of the Western region, the Pope said decisively. You mean Prince Roland of Grey Castle? He could not help but be startled. Based on the information we gathered over the past year, I discovered something incredible. Maine patted the bishop's shoulder. Whether it was the church's actions against him, or the Kingdom of Grey Castle's actions against him, they all failed without exception. The first failure can be traced back to the Duke of the Western region's attack on his territory. At that time, What did Roland have? Nothing but a run-down town. Outsiders think that he surrendered to the demons and defeated the Duke's knight group. But we all know that, except for extraordinaries, 1 or 2 witches are no threat to a fully armed knight equipped with God's stones of retaliation. Later, the information became more and more unbelievable. For example, in a secret letter sent to the Holy City 2 months ago, the new King Timothy once sent nearly 2,000 crazed soldiers to attack the western region, but they were defeated immediately. What does this mean? Tae-fun could not help but gasp. 2,000 crazed soldiers. Even in Hermes, they were still a force to be reckoned with. If we look at the information separately, we might not find anything, but when put together, it's very shocking. Roland Wimbledon has never been defeated in a war. The Pope said in a deep voice, and from the information, we can see that his power is growing at an amazing speed, and there's a tendency to expand outwards. If this drags on for another year, the entire Grey Castle may fall into his hands. At that time, I'm afraid that if we want to annex this vast land, we'll have to pay a much greater price. He paused and looked at Tae-fun. There are many things to deal with in the agency. I have no time to take care of the operation and expansion of the church, so I can only entrust these matters to you. After the Archbishop left, the appearance of the room also changed. The torches on the wall disappeared, and so did the pure witch who was studying the magic stone and the stone table. The figure of the Pope gradually faded away, and finally, only Isabella, Zero, and the black-veiled woman were left. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known that Prince Roland of Grey Castle is such an interesting person. Isabella smacked her lips. Why do I think he's more likely to defeat the demons than the church? What do you mean? The black-veiled woman frowned. Do you want to betray the church? Betray? Don't make it sound so bad. Isabella shrugged. Isn't the purpose of the church to ensure the survival of human beings in the battle of divine will? If someone else can do it, I don't mind serving them. You. Chapter 445. West of Grey Castle, north of Longsong Stronghold. Sir Schilt sat by the fireplace with a serious look on his face. Yesterday evening, after Miso Schilt left the mansion, there was no news of him, and he did not return until the next morning. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Recently, Miso had been very close to several big families in the western region, and the Honeysuckle family, which was in charge of Stronghold, had also released the news that His Highness planned to integrate the western region. At that time, all territories would adopt the same law, and at the same time, the great nobles' power of enfeoffment would be taken back, which meant that they could not expand their own lower nobles, nor could they recruit a knight to fight for them. As for small nobles like Schilt, it did not have much impact, and even had a lot of benefits. After all, according to the news, as long as they were loyal to His Highness, they would be rewarded handsomely. So at this time, the small nobles became the most stable group. Whether His Highness' reform plan was successful or not, they could accept it. So the wisest thing to do was to wait and see. But Miso Schilt did not think so. Master, the attendant who went out to look for the second young master has returned, the butler said as he pushed open the door of Sir's study. How is it, did you find him? No, the butler shook his head. I have searched the taverns, casinos, theaters, and brothels in Stronghold, but still did not find any trace of the young master. Sir Schilt was a little anxious. The people who were sent to look for Miso were divided into 2 groups. The first group went to the small noble territories nearby. Most of them were knight enfeoffed by Duke Ryan, and their status was equivalent to their own family, so Miso often went to these territories to attend some parties and dinners. The second group went to the entertainment places in Stronghold, which were also popular places for young nobles. Seeing that both groups of people returned empty-handed, Sir's bad feeling became stronger and stronger. He got up and walked to the window, looking to the east of the territory. After crossing 2 territories of Sir, it was the territory of the Elk family, which was also the largest Earl territory in the western region. Ever since the fall of the Duke of Ryan and the Perrault of the Honeysuckle family had completely sided with Prince Roland, the Elk family had vaguely become the leader of the resistance against the prince. Damn it, Miso couldn't have gone there, right, master? Second young master is back. Suddenly, a servant ran into the study. He's changing in the hall. It seems like he's about to leave. What? Sir immediately grabbed the crutch beside him, ignoring the butler's dissuasion, and quickly walked downstairs. As soon as he stepped into the hall, Schilt suddenly felt a buzz in his head. He saw Miso take off his thick coat and change into a thin, soft leather coat. In front of him was a set of shiny knight armor. The two subordinates were currently bustling about, preparing the final steps of putting on the armor. Where did you go yesterday? The old sir could not help shouting. What are you going to do now? Father, here's our chance, Miso said excitedly. The chance to be promoted from the lowest knight to the baron, or even the viscount. Schilt felt his blood boiling. Who told you that? Sir Jacques Med, he brought His Majesty's secret order. Oh no. Schilt could not help but take 2 steps back, his heart sinking to the bottom. Jacques Med was the eldest son of the Elk family, not to mention that the new King Timothy was involved. Everyone knew that the enemy Timothy wanted to eradicate the most was Roland Wimbledon, who was in charge of the western region. The last thing he wanted to happen had happened, and it seemed to be more serious than he had imagined. What on earth did you hear? Sir Med summoned most of the nobles of the western region to his castle and announced His Majesty's handwritten document, which stated that as long as they helped him capture Longsong stronghold, everyone's title and territory would be promoted by 1 level. Miso seemed still immersed in the grand scene. Lady Miriam of the Wild Rose family, Lord Cavan of the Maple family, and Lord Reminoa of the Wolf family all put their fingerprints on the document without hesitation and swore to serve His Majesty. The rest of the nobles and knight also decided to follow the 4 big families and remove the Honeysuckle family's rule over Longsong stronghold. How stupid! How could the 4 big families make a decision on the spot just because of a document? Sir sighed inwardly. Did you forget that when the Duke of Ryan was still the guardian of the western region, these people were perfunctory about the Edict of Wimbledon III? When did they change their temperament and become so loyal? There was only one answer. This was a complete drama. The purpose was to make the small nobles who participated in the gathering believe in the good situation and encourage them to become the vanguard of this undercurrent. The specific plan was probably started several months ago. By now, the 4 big families had probably already determined the division of benefits after the victory. Schilt opened his mouth, but he couldn't say what he thought. Miso Schilt was not the first son Philin, so some dissuasion had no effect on him. Where are you going with this armor? The old sir asked after a moment of silence. To win honor and status. Miso put on the steel breastplate. Even if the Light of Dawn becomes the first knight of the western region, he will only be honored. But I will be honored for the whole family, father. When the dust settles, you will find that I am no worse than my brother. If Timothy can completely defeat Roland, you are right. But the new king's army is still far away in King's City, while His Highness Roland is close at hand. Have you forgotten how the Duke of Ryan was destroyed? Schilt said in a low voice. This time, it's different. His Majesty the King has shipped a batch of snow powder weapons, the same as the ones used by Prince Roland before. I heard from Sir Med that there are more powerful ones to come. Without the advantage of weapons, can I still recapture Longsong's stronghold? Miso put the long sword on his waist and nodded to his father. The battle will begin soon. Please wait for my good news here. Looking at his second son's back, Schilt threw his crutch to the ground. Master, you don't want to stop him? The butler came up to support the trembling old sir and asked worriedly. It is easy to stop him, but I am afraid that the family will be destroyed. He slowly shook his head. A noble who attended the rebellion meeting did not go to the attack site as agreed. What did this mean for the 4 families? Whether it was the crime of escaping or defecting, it could lead to the death of the Schilt family. Think on the bright side. What if the 4 families win? The butler comforted him. After all, the months of demons will not end so soon. I am afraid it will be 2 or 3 months before the snow melts. By the time the 4th prince's army arrives, the king's army may have already surrounded the western region. If it was before, he might really think so. But since his trip to Border Town, Sir had a completely different view of His Highness Roland. Not to mention that his eldest son Philin Schilt and his family's benefactor, Lady Agatha, both lived in Border Town. Chapter 446. However, before the butler left the territory of the Schilt family, Roland had already received a letter from the Second Army of Stronghold by bird. An hour later, Perrault's letter for help also arrived at the town castle. Due to the limited information carried by the flying messenger, Roland connected the contents of the 2 notes and confirmed a surprising piece of news. The 4 noble families of the western region had rebelled. Who gave them the confidence to rebel right under their noses? Roland immediately summoned Carter and Iron Axe and slapped the note in front of them. Your Highness, this is a message from Stronghold, Roland said angrily. Winter was coming to an end, and the new year would come in 3 days. There were many things to do in the construction of the city, and he also needed to guide the completion of the 3 supplies equipment in the town. These nobles really didn't know how to write the word, death, to make trouble for him at this time. According to the secret letter, the nobles in the city first led a group of squires to attack the city guards. By the time the patrolling guards on the city wall realized something was wrong, the lifting and lowering mechanism of the North City Gate suspension bridge had fallen into the nobles' control. They had to light the beacon and rely on the city wall to defend in place. The other members of the Second Army who saw the beacon signal divided the 10 groups of about 50 people in the camp into 2 teams according to the emergency response protocol. One team set out for the North City Gate, and the other rushed to the castle of Stronghold. Perrault's secret letter was sent by the second team after they exchanged fire with the enemy in the castle area. Only then did they realize that the enemy they encountered was the local nobles. Perrault Hull mentioned that the attackers who besieged the castle carried the flag of the 4 noble families. They must have planned this rebellion. Carter frowned after reading the note. And the nobles must have a new backbone to unite these scattered people. Indeed, the 4 noble families, or the 5 noble families under the Duke Ryan, were all great nobles on equal footing. The fact that they could put aside their prejudices and cooperate with each other meant that there was a bigger force involved in this muddy water. Otherwise, the earls would not be convinced of each other's strength, even if they fought for more than 10 years. At this time, there were only 1 or 2 possibilities left who had the leisure to intervene in the western region. You mean Timothy of King's City? Iron Axe looked at the chief knight. As a member of the Maugin tribe, he was not as sensitive to the political situation in Greycastle as Carter was. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the church. Roland curled his lips. From what they did at Fallen Dragon Ridge, it's obvious that it's only a matter of time before they attack the western region. The problem is, the second letter mentioned that the enemy seemed to have firearms in their ranks. Carter frowned. Did they already know the gunpowder formula? Snow powder is no longer a secret to both the church and Timothy, but if they want to use it flexibly, they still have a long way to go. The prince gently knocked on the table. I'm just curious, even if they have the support of the forces behind them, distant water can't put out a nearby fire. Border Town is the closest place to Stronghold, so where did they get the confidence to fight against the soldiers of the First Army? It's probably because of the months of the demons. Iron Axe thought for a moment and replied. Last time, although you used thunder to defeat the Duke's Knight Regiment, you didn't show outstanding siege ability. Now the roads are blocked by heavy snow, and the border is invaded by demonic beasts. For them, this is the best guarantee for a successful rebellion. You won't have the strength to attack Longsong Stronghold until at least 2 months later. Then they'll be blocked by the towering walls and mountains? Yes. Iron Axe couldn't help but grin. They also have the weapons you have, plus the unclimbable walls, and even the reinforcements from the forces behind them. It's not impossible to defeat you at the foot of the wall. I think they think so. But they know nothing about the power of Border Town. Roland stood up. Iron Axe. Please give the order, Your Highness. He immediately stood up. The first army is now ready to go. We'll set off tomorrow morning, the prince said loudly. 500 people with 6 field cannons. You'll arrange the specific troops. Yes. Iron Axe gave a standard military salute. Now the size of Border Town's first army was more than 4 times larger than the original 500 militia. The whole army had more than 2,200 people, and the wheels were basically in place. Their firepower output was not the same as before. And thanks to the improvement of the soldiers' cultural level, the First Army's efficiency in carrying out orders had also greatly improved. As long as the preparation order was issued, there would be special personnel in the army to allocate ammunition and rations according to the number of soldiers and the number of days. The logistics work of 500 people could be completed in almost 1 day. Compared to the knight and the mercenary corps, who needed half a month to prepare for the expedition, this could be called an incredible speed. And they would set off on the town's 11 paddle steamers and directly arrive at Longsong Stronghold. After entering mass production, a ship with a reinforced concrete foundation would be launched every 5 days. This was under the condition that the construction speed was deliberately slowed down. The only thing limiting its number was the crew and the steam engine. Carter. At your command, Your Highness, the chief knight said with his head held high. You stay in Border Town. The knight's mouth instantly drooped. What? No, Your Highness, how can you leave me here again? It's the months of the demons now. The demonic beasts are a bigger threat than the nobles. Roland was unmoved. Guard my town well. After the 2 left, he sighed. This time, the witches also need to go with me. I'll follow you wherever you go, Nightingale said with a smile. Considering that the opponent might be the church, before all the members of the First Army were equipped with God's stones of retaliation, only witches could effectively deal with the pure witches' sneak attacks. Roland finally decided on the list of 6 witches: Vendi, Lightning, Maggie, Sylvie, Nana, and Nightingale. If he added the 3 combat witches from Sleeping Island, it would be difficult for the pure witches to threaten him. Roland walked to the window and looked out at the snow-capped mountains and snow-covered fields. If the impassable mountain range was regarded as the walls of Longsong Stronghold, then the barbarian land to the north of the mountain range was equivalent to the territory of the 4 big families, which was also a place where his power could not reach. Elk, Wild Rose, Maple Leaf, Wolf. They had operated in their respective territories for hundreds of years and formed their own laws and customs. Even the Ryan family, the overlord of the western region, rarely interfered. He had originally planned to slowly divide and absorb these nobles' territories after building the city, but this rebellion gave him an opportunity to annex the vast land and population in the suburbs of Longsong Stronghold. He did not intend to let this group of nobles go. To be continued. Chapter 447. At dawn, Kakuzim arrived at the dock. What was different from usual was that the dock was filled with silent people. They carried backpacks and long spears on their backs, like a dense forest in the wind and snow. Despite the large number of people, the scene was very orderly. The soldiers boarded the paddle steamer one by one. The scene alone made Kakuzim speechless. Kakuzim could not help but swallow his saliva. These were the soldiers of His Highness. It's incredible, the old man thought. When he was young, he had traveled more than half of Greycastle, from Seawanshire to the port of Clearwater, and led a merchant fleet to the fjords. He had seen the mighty armored knight and the fierce barbarians who could kill beasts with their bare hands. To him, those people were undoubtedly extremely powerful warriors. However, he did not expect to feel this power again in front of a group of ordinary people, and it was even stronger than before. Yes, these people are all ordinary people. Kikuzum had been in border town for almost 4 months and had a deeper understanding of the town. He knew that the members of the First Army were mostly local natives. Most of them were already adults when they joined the army. They had a variety of occupations, such as miners, hunters, furnace workers, and masons, but none of them were soldiers. In other words, they had never received combat training since they were young. However, in just a few months, these people had already become as powerful as any knight regiment. What kind of magic did His Highness cast? You really want to go? Vader's deliberately lowered voice came from behind him. He could tell that he was also affected by the silent team. Otherwise, why would I apply for the position of captain? Kikuzum took a deep breath. But they're going to war. They're all serving His Highness, the old man said without turning his head, and so am I. The voice behind him was silent for a moment. Don't die out there. He did not answer and just waved his hand. Kikuzum boarded the number 6 paddle steamer in the snow. According to tradition, captains could name their ships. Although this strange ship belonged to His Highness, he was told that he had the right to do so. However, the old man was hesitant. This was the first time he had taken up the position of captain after more than 10 years of sailing. He hoped that he could come up with a memorable name. Boss, you're here. As he walked into the cabin at the bow of the ship, his assistant immediately came up to him. The boiler is now warming up. I guarantee it will be up soon. This young man was called Barracuda. He came from the Southern Territory and had several years of fishing experience. If he was on another fleet, he might not even be able to become a sailor, but here, it was no different. Everyone was a newbie. Is the crew all here? We arrived a long time ago. You're the last one. The man winked. If you don't know how to respect a captain, I'll be happy to let you scrub the deck for the whole day. Yes, Captain, said the young man, standing erect, of course I do. That's more like it, Kikuzum said, stroking his beard. Tell the boiler room to make the fire bigger, but don't close the damn steam valve. I don't want to hit the bottom of the ship in front again. Okay, I got it. Before he finished his sentence, Barracuda showed his true colors. He winked at the old man and then flew out of the cockpit. This little rascal, Kikuzum shook his head with a smile. The solemn atmosphere of the First Army was greatly diluted. He felt as if he had returned to the days when he was sailing on the sea. Walking to the steering wheel, the old man gently stroked the wooden handle and began to calm down to review the operation process of the paddle steamer. The stone boat invented by His Highness was completely different from sailboats. It had no masts or cabins under the deck. There were only 2 rooms in the bow and the middle of the hull. The one in front was called the steering room, where you could clearly see the route through 2 large windows. The one in the middle was the boiler room, where the boat was powered. The rear and rear of the cab were bare decks. During their training, they would often bring some miners along with them to the west along the Redwater River. They would go to the edge of the concealing forest and dig up some coal. This coal was more durable than firewood, and was also a relatively common source of heat in the Siwinshire region. Now, the deck was covered with windproof cloth and a shed was set up overhead. Obviously, it was prepared for the soldiers. Even though Kikuzum had never touched this new thing before, he soon discovered that it was not difficult to make it move. In fact, it was much easier than a sailboat. Just the fact that there was no need to adjust the sails according to the direction and strength of the wind had saved a lot of manpower and time. Any villager could heat up the boiler, but it was impossible to master how to operate the sails without half a year of practice. As long as the chimney blew out white gas and closed the valve, the boat would leave. Just then, a dull whistle came from the front, breaking the tranquility of border town in the early morning. It was the signal to set off. Boss, the water in the boiler is boiling. Barracuda scurried back to the steering room. Ring the bell. Tell Bigfoot and Grizzly to close the valve. Speed, forward 1 step. Kikuzum ordered solemnly. Yes, forward 1 step. The Barracuda pulled up a thin iron wire on the wall, and along this wire, the corresponding bell in the boiler room would vibrate, conveying the captain's orders. The boat shook violently, and the wooden wheels on both sides slowly turned. Kakuzim held the steering wheel and looked straight ahead. When Vader asked that question, he did not say what he really wanted. Or rather, serving the Lord was only a small part of the answer. He simply liked the position of captain more than anything else. Whether it was a sailboat or a paddle steamer, Kakuzim felt sincerely happy when he held the steering wheel and broke the waves on the water. This was the life he wanted. Pull the sail. No, continue to add coal. The old man turned the steering wheel to the right and shouted, "Boys, hurry up, we're leaving. Asterisk, as long as you can take me to Border Town, the Shilk family will reward you handsomely. How about 5, no, 10 golden dragon?" The butler asked the boatman, who was in a dilemma, as he blocked the door of a small wooden cabin by the river. His left foot was stuck in the crack of the door, so that the boatman would not close the old door and keep him out. Sir. It's not that I don't want to take you, but I really can't," the boatman stammered. You see, my boat has a bare bottom and doesn't even have a shed to keep out the snow. It's fine for crossing the river, but you said you want to go to Border Town, and that's going to take several days. Not to mention whether I can get there with a pole, it's a world of ice and snow at night. Where are we going to sleep? If you sleep on the boat, you'll be frozen into 2 popsicles all night. Are there any other boatmen around here who can go to Border Town? The butler asked, unwilling to give up. No, the other side repeatedly waved his hand. We only have a few small boats, only in Stronghold can there be a large sailboat that can stay overnight. You should go there to find it. If I could enter Longsong Stronghold, why would I bother to come to the suburban pier to find these boatmen who fish and ferry for a living? The butler fiercely stepped on the snow on the ground. Since the 4 families began to attack Stronghold, all the gates had been closed. It took him half a day to bypass Stronghold and come here, but unfortunately, it was still in vain. It was getting dark, how could I complete the task my master had given me? The butler looked at the Redwater River with a bitter expression, but soon he was stunned. God, what is that? He rubbed his eyes to make sure that he was not mistaken. A very large fleet was sailing in his direction. The appearance of the ships was different from the sailboats he had seen before. In the sky full of flying snow, the fleet made a rumbling sound and moved quickly along the river. Except for the first oddly shaped sailboat, the other ships obviously didn't have sails, but they were moving against the wind. The bow of the ships cut the water into 2 sections, as if they were splitting the waves. Chapter 448. Longsong Stronghold was located on a tributary of the Redwater River, and the whole city was divided into 2 parts by the river. Most of the residents lived on the west bank, while the east bank was a compact farmland. Unlike other big cities that set farmland in the suburbs, the towering walls of Longsong Stronghold surrounded the residential areas and some farmland. It was not so much to resist the demonic beasts, but to prevent the attack of the same kind. Even if the city was surrounded by the enemy, Longsong Stronghold would not be cut off from supplies. Because of this, the outer wall of Longsong Stronghold was cut off at the entrance of the river. Several thick iron ropes hung between the 2 sections of the wall. If the enemy intended to attack Longsong Stronghold through the Redwater River, as long as the hemp ropes were cut, the iron chains would slide into the river. However, the Western Territory was rarely attacked by the fleet, so the iron chains were almost never used, and this time was no exception. Roland's fleet moved as fast as lightning, and by dusk, the outline of the walls of Longsong Stronghold could be seen. The smoke of the beacon still floated above the city, adding a bit of ink to the gradually darkening sky. The enemy is mainly concentrated in the area of the Lord's Castle, and there are still a small number of militias fighting with the guards at the north gate, but it seems that they won't be able to hold on for long. Lightning had already investigated the situation in the city and reported in detail to the prince. The number of people besieging the castle is about 200, and the first layer has been lost. The enemy does have a weapon similar to a gun, but it is completely different from the one we use. Is Perrault all right? Roland was most concerned about the safety of his agent. He's fine, just a little frightened, but... But what? His family suffered a disaster, Lightning said, curling her lips. Probably Sir Perrault received the news in advance and summoned his father to the castle, but the rest of his relatives in the territory, including the Countess, were killed by the nobles as hostages to force him to surrender. The little girl paused. I found a chance to fly into the castle to meet him, and told him that you would arrive soon. He only asked me one thing. Roland nodded. Go ahead. An eye for an eye. There was an unwritten rule among the nobles that it was rare to kill someone with a title. As a relative of the Earl of Honeysuckle, most of them had the title of Sir. But now, the four great families actually dared to completely fall out with each other. Apart from their hatred towards the honeysuckle flower for relying on Roland to earn a lot of benefits, the other reason was probably the forces behind them. By now, Roland could basically confirm that it was the new king, Timothy Wimbledon, who was supporting the church to kill the nobles and helping the king to execute the rebels were two completely different things. He looked in the direction of the stronghold and said coldly, pass down my order. All troops are to enter the city and occupy the docks. 8 heard footsteps below the city wall. Numbly, he raised his flintlock and aimed at the dark hole under his feet. This was the only way to climb up the wall from the inside. After the enemy seized the gate, they launched several waves of attacks, but in the end, they failed to take down the northern part of the wall. The battle had been going on since noon yesterday. He had never thought that he would be able to last so long in the biting cold wind. However, when he saw his teammates fall into a pool of blood one by one, he could no longer think about anything else. They're here again. A spear appeared beside him. 8 glanced to his side and found that it was his team leader, Copper Mountain. I heard something, he answered weakly, but it's so dark now, I can't see how many people there are. They also don't know how many of us are left, Copper Mountain comforted him. Then, how many are left? Copper Mountain hesitated. 5. Crow just breathed his last. Most of us won't live through tonight, 8 said bitterly. From the initial fear and panic to the current numbness, he finally understood what his instructor meant when he said, only real battles can make you mature quickly. However, this did not change the predicament they were in. Of the 3 squads that had gathered together, only 5 people were left. Even if the enemy did not attack the top of the wall, they would still freeze to death due to the lack of food and winter supplies. What's the use of surrendering now? Surrender? Copper Mountain snorted, didn't you hear what they were shouting? Wipe out the rebels. Even if we surrender, we'll still die. We might as well kill some of them here. 8 knew his captain was right. Many of the soldiers of the Second Army who came to the rescue yesterday had been captured and beheaded. They were not nobles, so they had no value in ransom. But, he was not willing to die here. The instructor had described all kinds of beautiful things about Border Town to him, and had also promised that as long as the months of the demons were over, the soldiers of the Second Army who performed well would be promoted to the First Army, and would also receive a new house for free. There was plenty of food, well water that would flow automatically when the valve was opened, and the room was heated without needing a fire. He wanted to survive and go to Border Town to see the magical things his instructor had told him. They're coming. Copper Mountain suddenly shouted and pulled the trigger. With the flash of the muzzle, 8 saw the silhouettes of the enemies in the dark. 6 or 7 people were slowly climbing up with shields in their hands. He could even see their terrified faces. Although the captain's shot did not hit the target, it had pointed him in the right direction. He aimed at the figure that disappeared in a flash and fired. The bullets hit the wooden shields with a dull thud. One of the men screamed in pain, followed by the sound of a heavy object rolling down the stairs. Seeing that they had been exposed, the rest of the soldiers desperately ran to the exit. Copper Mountain was still reloading the gun, but his frozen hands affected his speed. 8 shrank back and felt a chill in his heart when he reached for the gunpowder bag at his waist. It was empty. He had used up all the gunpowder. According to his usual training, he should have put on the bayonet at this time. He gritted his teeth and pulled out the bayonet. It took him a while to fix the sleeve on the gun, but before he could straighten the spear, the first enemy had already rushed out of the cave. Copper Mountain decisively attacked and knocked the first enemy to the ground. However, the second enemy who followed closely behind stabbed the captain's long sword into his chest. 8's mind went blank. He subconsciously thrust his spear out according to his training, but it hit the enemy's shield instead. The enemy kicked him to the ground, and the gun fell out of his hand. Am I going to die here? He looked up in despair, only to find that there was a shadow in the sky. It should have been difficult to distinguish such a dark thing on a snowy night, but the shadow was too close to him. It was like a falling curtain of the night, falling rapidly toward him. As the shadow became clearer, 8's eyes widened. It was a giant monster. He swore that he would only see such a horrible monster in his nightmares. It had a bloody mouth, a head bigger than a calf, and its wings could almost cover the entire top of the wall. The giant monster landed in front of 8 and crushed the enemy who had just crawled out of the hole into a meat patty. Roar, A.O. Chapter 449. 8 was so scared that he could not move. He could only watch as the monster turned its head to look at him. He could even see the mucus dripping from its grayish-brown fangs. Don't worry. I won't eat you. Ow! The monster suddenly spoke in a muffled human voice, which almost made 8 scream. Oh my God, this thing can talk. What surprised him even more was that a woman jumped down from the monster's back and walked to Bronze Mountain. She turned him over and felt him for a while. This guy is still alive. Maggie, take him to Nana. Ow! The monster seemed to understand her words. It raised its 2 front claws and grabbed the captain. It flapped its wings again and flew away. The strong airflow made 8 unable to open his eyes. When the wind and snow stopped, he squinted his eyes and looked up. There was no one on top of the city wall, as if everything that had happened was just a dream. No, it's not a dream. The woman is still here. The top of the city wall was pitch black. He could only see her figure roughly. There was no light around, but her pupils were emitting a strange golden light, like stars in the night sky. Who are you? Reinforcements. The woman's answer stunned him. What? 8 felt that even a dream would be more real than this. Are you here to help me? This is His Highness Roland's order. She squatted down and found a long sword from the flattened corpse. She waved it casually, ignoring the blood and flesh on it. 8 felt something churning in his stomach. He retched twice, but nothing came out except acid. At this moment, shouts came from below the city tower again. It was obvious that the commotion caused by the giant beast and the terrifying roar had shocked the enemy. However, it was only a shock. They couldn't see the shocking scene happening on top of the city wall. When the commotion subsided, they began to move again. The Highness you mentioned, is it the Prince of Border Town? He asked, wiping the corner of his mouth and gasping. Besides him, is there anyone else named Roland? The black-haired woman started to look for weapons on another body. 8 turned his head away and did not want to see what she was doing. But Border Town is at least 3 days away from here. How could His Highness know about the noble rebellion so quickly? 8 swallowed his saliva. And that monster was. That's not a monster, but a witch who saved you. Her tone turned cold. I don't have time to answer your questions. Just stay here quietly. Without the obstruction of the muskets, the enemy successfully climbed up the city wall. The flickering light of the torches lit up again, but when they found that there was only a woman standing in front of them, they were all stunned. But very quickly, this stalemate was broken by a low, malicious laughter. 8 naturally understood the meaning behind the laughter. All of you, pay attention. Don't get tricked by these bastards. Don't worry, boss. We'll keep an eye on him for you, but later, when I'm done, it'll be yours. Hee, no problem. Quick, come back to me. Ain't struggled to get up from the ground, but what happened next left him dumbfounded. A silver light flashed and the laughter stopped abruptly. The leading enemy was cut in half by the long sword. Even his shield and leather armor could not block the blade. He did not even see how the woman did it. When the two halves of the body fell down with blood spurting, everyone's smile froze on their faces. However, this was just the beginning. The black-haired woman took a step forward and swung her sword horizontally. He could not see her movements clearly, but Ain't heard a series of sounds of flesh scraping and bones breaking. Before the remaining three could react, their abdomens were cut open. Their intestines came out and mixed with blood, spilling all over the ground. You. Ain't opened his mouth but did not know what to say. The woman looked back at him and said, "Go and gather the rest of your companions on top of the wall. Someone will come to pick you up later." Then she jumped down the city wall. This section of the city wall was at least 30 feet high. Enduring the pain all over his body, he scrambled to the edge of the city wall and looked down. He saw that the crowd below had turned into a pot of boiling water. The woman was rampaging, sweeping everything in her way. She swung her weapon up and down like harvesting wheat, cutting down anyone who dared to stand in front of her. In less than a quarter of an hour, the enemy collapsed. They had never seen such a terrible opponent. She was faster than a snow wolf and stronger than a grizzly bear. No one could survive a round of her sword. They could not avoid or block her attacks. The subordinates of the nobles all fled. The siege had been broken by one person. She chased after the fleeing crowd, leaving a path of blood behind. Ain't sat on the ground, feeling cold sweat soaking his back. Was this the power of a witch? But no matter what, he survived. Dozens of bonfires lit up the surroundings of the stronghold castle. The people of the four families had surrounded the place tightly. After a day and a night of fighting, the second floor of the castle had also been conquered. The rebels of the Honeysuckle family had now retreated to the top floor, suffering from hunger and fear. Looking at the towering castle in front of him, Jacques Med felt a trace of excitement in his heart. After his father's death, he had come all the way back from King's City to inherit the Earl's title. And now, he had a chance to go further. His Majesty Timothy's secret letter mentioned that if he could control Longsong's stronghold for King's City, the army of King's City would come here when the snow melted to suppress the rebel king, Roland Wimbledon. As long as he could completely eradicate the rebel king's forces, it was possible to let him manage the western region. Plus, he would get a share of the territory of the Earl of Honeysuckle. By then, he would become a duke. Duke Med, what a wonderful title. And this castle would also be his permanent residence in the future. "My lord, the 6th attack team has retreated," a knight came over and reported. "They said the enemy's gunfire has become much less frequent. Should we send the armored team?" Jacques Med nodded and said, "Go ahead and arrange it." The so-called armored team was a team specially set up to deal with firearms, usually consisting of 3 or 4 people. The two of them held a wooden shield that was made of several layers of iron sheets and was able to cover their whole body. In the middle of the shield, there was a lookout slot and a shooting hole for the gunners on their side to return fire. In order to make a few more of these shields, he reluctantly tore apart more than 10 pieces of knight armor. Of course, the thick iron shields also had a weakness that they were not easy to move. When going up and down the stairs, they could easily become the enemy's target. Fortunately, the Honeysuckle family won't be able to hold on for much longer. Jacques sneered in his heart. Although the other party's reaction was unexpectedly fast and they had already sent some of the patrolling soldiers and knights into the castle before the allied forces of the four families charged into the fortress, there were still less than 100 of them. It would take several days for the news to reach the ears of Prince Roland. Chapter 450. My lord, there seems to be something wrong in the west of the city. The guard in charge of blocking the streets suddenly walked quickly to Earl Med's side. I heard a strange sound coming from there, so I sent 2 teams to investigate, but none of them came back. What? Jacques frowned. You didn't hear it wrong, did you? No, I heard it very clearly. It was like the sound of a person constantly inhaling and exhaling, wheezing and wheezing. The guard even simulated it a few times. Not a tramp snoring. People sleeping outside in this weather would have frozen to death, my lord, the guard insisted. And if a person could make such a loud snoring sound, he must be at least a giant as tall as the city wall. The count stared at him for a long time before he turned around and shouted, Sir Dawkin. My lord, you called. A noble with the Maple family emblem on his chest came up to him. Bring your guards and follow my men to check the pier in the city. Jacques patted him on the shoulder. Report to me immediately if you find anything. Can you find someone else? The young noble hesitated. Father told me to go into the castle with you. How long will it take to check the pier? It's a long time, the count said with a smile. Even if the Honeysuckle family rebels surrender, I'll wait for you here. Well. Okay. Watching the 2 leave, Jacques' face turned cold. What the hell? Do they think they can get the same credit just because they sent their son to the castle with me? His Majesty's secret letter only mentioned me. What a good plan. Not long after, he vaguely heard gunshots coming from the west. What's going on? Jacques immediately became alert. The eldest son of the Maple family did not get any guns at all. Just when he was about to send his knight to check the situation, the guard who had reported earlier stumbled into the camp. My lord, bad news. What's bad news? The rebel king is here. The guard said with his eyes wide open. There are thousands of them, and they're coming to the castle. You mean Roland Wimbledon's team? Jacques raised his hand and slapped the guard. There are thousands of them. Do you believe that I won't hang you on top of the city gate right now for spouting nonsense in the camp? Sir, they were indeed holding the flag of the Greycastle royal family. The guard did not dare to dodge, so he knelt on one knee and said, I wanted Sir Dawkin's squire to capture 2 people for questioning, but as soon as they rushed over, they. So what? The count asked, gritting his teeth. He was shot down by a concentrated volley of gunfire. The guard's expression was as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. At that time, there seemed to be countless sparks in the darkness, and the crackling sound almost never stopped. More than 20 of them had only rushed out less than 100 steps, and they all fell to the ground. Even the horses couldn't stand. He swallowed his saliva and said, Sir, I've never seen such a concentrated shooting. If there weren't more than 1,000 people, how could they kill Sir's guards in an instant? Where's the eldest son of the Maple family? He's already escaped. The count sat on the chair with his legs weak. How could this be possible? His mind was in a mess. Counting the time it took for the news to come and go, the 4 families started to act yesterday at noon, and Prince Roland could arrive at Longsong Stronghold tonight. Did it mean that he could travel back and forth between the 2 places in one day? Even a sailing ship with the wind all the way could not achieve this speed. And 1,000 people was even more like a fantasy. To transport so many people in one breath, at least a large fleet was needed, but the information from border towns showed that they did not even have a ship before winter. How could things become like this? No, the more it was like this, the calmer he had to be. Jacques wiped the sweat off his forehead. The number of people should have been bullshit by the guards. He was completely scared out of his wits by the gunfire. Without the light of a torch, who knew how many people were standing in the dark dock area? Moreover, the range of the guns was only about 40 steps or so. Although the power was amazing, the loading speed and hit rate were extremely low. Even if all of them were equipped with these weapons, the street leading to the castle area could at most accommodate more than 20 people side by side. As long as the Wild Rose family and the Wolf family were informed, they could gather the night together and wait for the enemy to shoot at once. Then the other mercenaries and guards would swarm in, and maybe they could defeat the enemy. After all, fighting in the streets was not like fighting in the wild. The loading time of the guns was too fatal. Damn it, Jacques slammed the armrest of the chair and ordered the captain of the guard, go and invite the Count of the Wild Rose family and the Viscount of the Wolf family here. In addition, I want all the people with guns to block the entrance of the castle area. Go. Anyway, the training of guns was much faster than the training of crossbows. First, let this group of people delay the enemy's advance. It would not hurt if some of them died. If necessary, the knight could directly step over them. However, the news brought by the captain of the guard stunned the count. The two of them have left the camp with their men. In order to prevent Perrault from escaping, the four families each occupied one side of the castle area. He did not expect that they would receive the news faster than him. At this time, there was a lot of gunfire outside the castle area. Just as the guard had reported, it was like a dense drum beat, which could be heard clearly even in the windy and snowy night. These bastards! Jacques felt a chill in his heart. He looked at the castle for the last time and had to order a retreat. Of course, it was only himself and his guards. As for the people still in the castle, he had no time to care about them. After rushing out of the castle area, the count found that the situation was not good. The enemy was everywhere outside, and any knight who tried to cross the blockade would be mercilessly shot down. The weapons in their hands seemed as if they didn't need to be reloaded, and they could shoot several times in one breath, which was completely different from the flintlock that Timothy had sent. The scene was chaotic. Except for Sir Dawkin who had escaped first, the other three families were trapped here. "Sir, what should we do?" "Call the armored team," he shouted. "We'll follow the iron shields and rush in the same direction." When the three armored teams slowly moved forward with their shields, the other knight also noticed the movement here and almost simultaneously followed. If they could not break through the enemy's line of defense this time, they were afraid that they would never have a chance to escape. However, Jacques' plan failed. When they were still 100 steps away from the enemy's weapons sprayed dazzling flames. The shields that should be able to block lead bullets were shot full of holes by the oncoming bullets. The shield bearers in the front row were instantly killed, and the splashing metal fragments pierced through their bodies. A thick mist of blood rose behind the iron shields. Before the count could shout the order to charge, he was directly knocked to the ground by a round of gunfire. To be continued. Chapter 451. Genius in a Second to Remember Love. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Roland walked into the messy castle. Perrault and Earl Hull were already kneeling on one knee in the hall, welcoming his arrival. The corpses on the ground had all been moved away, but the smell of blood still lingered. Broken furnishings and broken weapons could be seen everywhere. He could almost imagine the scene of repeated battles between the two sides during the battle for the castle. "Get up." Roland walked in front of him, bent down and held his arm. "Yes." Perrault's voice was a little choked. "Your Highness, you're finally here." "You did a good job," he said in a low voice. "The four families will pay the price for this, and the murderers will be brought to justice. I couldn't defend Longsong's stronghold for you, you did your best." "It's not your fault," Roland sighed. Perrault was not a good manager, which could be seen from the previous capture of the city by the light cavalry and the current noble rebellion. He was good at managing the territory, was very proficient in trade, and was also good at seizing opportunities. But he was not a political strategist, and was not good at fighting and conspiring. If the Second Army had not been stationed in the castle according to emergency measures, he would not have been able to hold on for 2 days. But this did not mean that Perrault Hull was not a good manager. If he was not good at fighting, he should have given him a territory that did not need to fight. Compared to a talent who could fight, Roland preferred an operator who had the mind of a businessman. "Love goes small say Netku, I believe there must be a reason for this riot." He looked around at all the people present. "This is a complete conspiracy. The enemy is trying to subvert the order of the western region, so as to obtain benefits that do not belong to them. The scene quieted down. Whether it was the soldiers of the First Army who were on guard with guns, or the wounded knight behind Perrault, they all looked at His Highness with burning eyes. For this, they did not hesitate to commit felonies, murder the nobles, and slaughter the people. After today's battle, it was unknown how many people would lose their families and how many houses would be ransacked. But in the end, their plot did not succeed. It was your unyielding resistance that prevented the fortress from falling into an even greater tragedy. Your performance was heroic, and your willpower is commendable. The knight unknowingly puffed out his chest a little higher. However, the battle is not over yet. These traitors are fleeing in panic. Next, it's time for us to take revenge. I swear, no matter where the enemy hides, they will not be able to escape the judgment that will come, whether it is in the territory of the four great families, or in the capital. Roland paused, then said firmly, and the culprit who started the rebellion will definitely be punished. Your blood will not flow in vain. Long live His Highness. Perrault and Earl Hull knelt down again. Long live His Highness. Long live His Highness. Then, the surviving knight and the soldiers of the Second Army shouted. Soon, everyone was kneeling on one knee. Their upper bodies were straight, and their right hands were placed on their chests as they shouted a slogan in unison. Long live Prince Roland. After comforting the people present, Roland summoned Perrault, Van, Brian, and Iron Axe to the study on the third floor of the castle. This was the only place that had not been invaded, and all the furnishings were basically intact. He knew that he would probably have to spend the next few days here. First, he had to learn about the situation in the city. He looked at Iron Axe, who immediately reported, "The witches have recaptured the north and east gates that the four great families occupied. Now the First Army, under the guidance of Miss Sylvie, is cleaning up the rebels in the city. They should be able to restore order in the city by tomorrow morning." What about the casualties? So far, a total of 6 people have been injured, all from the Rifle Battalion, but they have been treated by Miss Nana. What about the Second Army? Have you calculated? Not yet, but according to the current information, the casualties are relatively heavy. Brian hesitated. The 2 squads that went to support the city wall were defeated and haven't been regrouped yet. Of the 50 people guarding the castle, 11 were killed, and almost none of the soldiers patrolling on the city wall survived. Roland nodded. The fact that these 100 people could hold on for 2 days was due to the low intensity of the war in this era, especially when the enemy lacked effective siege weapons. The defending side often had a greater advantage. If the enemy had not used firearms, it would have been very difficult to break into the Lord's castle by relying on the flesh and blood of the mercenaries and personal guards. At the beginning of the design, this building had fully taken into account the fact that it could prevent enemy attacks. Thinking of this, he ordered Iron Axe, "Bring me some firearms used by the rebels and let me have a look." Roland was very concerned about the new hot weapons in this era. Although he had known that this day would come sooner or later since the birth of the snow powder, Timothy's speed of research and development really surprised him. Iron Axe quickly carried out the order. Half an hour later, several long-barreled weapons of different lengths and shapes were carried into the study by the soldiers. After seeing the real thing, Roland quickly understood why the other party was able to create this batch of weapons in such a short time. In a sense, these long-barreled weapons could not be called flintlocks. They had no trigger or firing mechanism. They were just metal pipes with holes at both ends. One end was deeper and was used to load gunpowder and bullets, with a needle-like hole at the end for ignition. The other end was shallower and was inserted into a bamboo pole or wooden stick to act as a handle. In terms of structure, it was very similar to the prototype of the flintlock, the flintlock. The loading process of this primitive firearm was the same as that of a flintlock, but it was more troublesome to fire. It required the gunman to clamp the wooden pole under his armpit and hold an open flame in his other hand to ignite the gunpowder. Due to the limited posture, it was impossible to aim accurately and could only roughly point forward. But it was still an out-and-out hot weapon. Apart from all kinds of inconveniences, its firing principle was exactly the same as that of a flintlock, and the barrel and bullets were no different from those of a later generation. Therefore, it was far more powerful than a crossbow. As long as it hit, even a knight's armor would not be able to withstand it. Furthermore, it was obvious that Timothy had spent a lot of effort to modify these flintlock spears. Some of them were made of rolled iron, with clear traces of hammering left on the body, while others were probably made of wrought copper, with a relatively smooth surface. Considering that these were only experimental products for the 4 families, Timothy's own firearms should be better. But, no matter how good a flintlock gun was, it was still a flintlock gun. When the spring offensive was launched, the king would have no chance of winning against the Western Region army equipped with revolving rifles, bolt rifles, and heavy machine guns. Roland turned his eyes back to the 4 people. From tomorrow on, the First Army will recover the suburbs of Longsong's stronghold one by one. Any nobles who resist can be shot on the spot. I hope that in a week, the whole Western region will be unified. Chapter 452. Ren Med had been trapped in the basement of the House of Elks for half a month. He thought he could stop Jacques, but he did not expect that Jacques would act first. This is today's lunch. Please enjoy. The long-faced butler, Sean, handed a plate of sticky food to the side of the cage. It looked like a mixture of oatmeal and vegetable leaves, and the portion was only the size of a palm. Let me out, you idiot. Ren threw the plate to the ground, grabbed the bars and shouted, Jacques is also an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's not too late to let me out. The butler shook his head regretfully and took out a handkerchief to wipe his dirty shoes. If I were you, I wouldn't waste the food that hasn't reached my mouth. His Excellency the Count has ordered that in order to save your energy, I'll only send food once a day this Monday. Damn it, didn't you hear what I said? Ren cursed. This is not a matter of one meal. If we don't stop Jacques, he'll destroy the House of Elks. For my father's sake, quickly open this cage. Perhaps the second half of the sentence worked, as the butler who was about to leave stopped in his tracks. Your father. I think if he were still alive, I'm afraid he would expel you immediately. He turned his head and looked at Ren expressionlessly. Young master, you seem to have forgotten that it was Roland Wimbledon, the 4th prince, who killed the Count of Elks. The Honeysuckle family not only defected to the prince, but also assisted him in suppressing the other 4 families. Right now, your brother is correcting this mistake, but you're scared out of your wits. How can you be regarded as a knight? It's not up to you to judge whether I'm a qualified knight or not, Ren said angrily. In the past 3 years, when I was fighting against the demonic beasts in the Hermes defense line, Jacques was enjoying himself in the king's city. Do you think he attacked the Honeysuckle family out of courage? Don't make me laugh to death. He's just blinded by benefits. Sean sighed and said, even though you're Lord Jacques' brother, you should still respect him. After all, he's an earl and the head of the Elk family. With that, the butler ignored Ren and quickly left the basement along the stairs. When the door closed, the underground returned to silence. Damn it! The second son of the Elk slammed his fist on the floor. Since the beginning of winter, Jacques had been visiting the other families more and more frequently. At first, he did not pay much attention to it. After all, he had no interest in running his family. Furthermore, when he was captured by the prince for the first time, Jacques refused to pay the ransom, and it was Perrault who helped him get out of prison. Thus, the relationship between Jacques and the prince dropped to the freezing point. Even so, Ren didn't intend to compete with him for the position of the head of the family. When he heard that Border Town was planning to build a city, he even considered going to Border Town and pledging his loyalty to the 4th prince, officially becoming a guardian knight. But later, the situation changed. During a private banquet held by the Elk Mansion, he heard the news that the 4 families were preparing to unite against Longsong's stronghold. That night, Ren rushed into Jacques' study and questioned him about the matter, but was kicked out by Jacques with great displeasure. After thinking for a whole night, he planned to tell the news to Perrault first, and then bring the patrol team to stop Jacques. Unexpectedly, Jacques had tampered with the breakfast, and when he woke up, he found himself in a cage. After that, no matter how much Ren roared and warned him, he could not see Jacques again. Every day, he could only tell the time by looking at the skylight in the corner of the basement, and the only person he could contact was Jacques' personal butler. Growl. His stomach growled, and only then did he realize that he was a little hungry. Looking at the food scattered on the ground, Ren turned his head and lay down on the wheat straw pile behind him. I'd better sleep. He thought, if I sleep, I won't feel hungry. Just as he closed his eyes, he heard footsteps in the basement again. Could it be Jacques? He jumped down from the straw pile and leaned against the railing. With the faint light coming in from the skylight, he saw a small and slender figure. Obviously, it was not the arrogant Count. Brother, are you okay? When the person came to the cage, he found that it was Aurelia, the third daughter of the elk family. Why are you in here? My brother is not here, and the servants can't control me. Aurelia looked at the oatmeal on the ground and said in disbelief, they gave you this? That's too much. Wait for me, I'll ask the kitchen to make something for you. Jacques is not in the mansion. Hearing the first half of his sister's words, Ren's heart suddenly sank, and he did not even have time to fill his stomach. Where did he go? I don't know. He left 2 days ago. Aurelia shook her head. He took most of the guards with him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the chance to enter the basement. It's over. Ren's heart sank. He had not returned for 2 days, and today was the 3rd day. Even if he could get out now, it would probably be too late. Brother, I heard that my brother wants to harm the honeysuckle family. Is it true? Aurelia looked worried. Will Lord Perrault be okay? That's right, my sister has always liked Perrault Hall, and I've tried to matchmake them, but it seems that my friend has someone else in mind. But it was useless to think about it now. Ren leaned against the railing and sat down weakly. According to Jacques' style, he would definitely not let the Hull family go. Then, the whole western region would have to face the wrath of His Highness Thunder. Jacques has been in King City for too long, and he has no idea what he's going to face. Ren closed his eyes, and his mind involuntarily recalled the day of the attack on Border Town. Flames were blooming in front of him, and thunder was incessant. The knight who rushed in front seemed to have hit an invisible wall. His armor was vulnerable in front of the transparent arrows, and his years of training and the courage to fight for honor were all useless in front of the enemy's weapons. From that moment on, he could no longer think of going against His Highness. No one could defeat His Highness's troops, at least not mortals. If Prince Roland knew what happened in Stronghold and came again, no matter how many benefits the Elk family gained, what use would it be? This time, he would not let the 4 big families go. Brother, what's wrong? Aurelia shook him, but he did not move at all. The Elk family was finished. Just then, through the thick ceiling, Ren heard a faint roar, and then the ground slightly trembled, as if something had smashed into the mansion. Did I hear it wrong? Ren turned over, and saw that his sister had the same surprised expression. Then there was another dull thunder, but this time it was much clearer. Then there were continuous bangs, and the servants' panicked shouts came from above. Could it be Prince Roland's troops? Ren could not help but be stunned. How is this possible? What's happening outside? Aurelia stood up. I'll go out and have a look. No. Ren grabbed his sister's hand. Don't go anywhere. Just wait here. Huh? Listen to me. He swallowed and said dryly, there may be danger outside. The roar soon subsided. After about a quarter of an hour, a group of people broke into the basement. They wore brown uniforms and held strange long-handled weapons in their hands. Ren recognized at a glance that they were Prince Roland's troops. He was completely disheartened. He knew that Prince Roland would retaliate, but he did not expect it to come so soon. Could it be that this was a play written and performed by Prince Roland himself? Who are you? How dare you break into the Earl's mansion? Aurelia stood up and shouted. A tall, strong man walked out of the team. His facial features were sharp, and there was a murderous air between his eyebrows. He looked like a foreigner. You're the second son of the Elk family, Sir Renmed? The man asked. You know. Why don't you step back? What do you want? Aurelia's voice was trembling, but she still stood in front of the iron bars. I'm Ren. Don't hurt her, she's innocent. Ren thought that he was about to see an unbearable scene, but he did not expect that the man would completely ignore Aurelia, and what he said next was completely unexpected. Chapter 453. When Ren walked out of the Count's mansion, he involuntarily squinted his eyes and took a deep breath. After half a month, he finally felt the taste of daylight and snow again. Soldiers in uniforms could be seen everywhere outside. They did not rush into the mansion to plunder, but stood at every intersection in an orderly manner. Occasionally, he could see blood stains in the snow, but not a corpse. There were no messy clothes or cloth on the ground, which meant that they did not loot the dead when they cleaned up the battlefield. Ren confirmed his thoughts again. This team was different from any troop he had ever seen. Is Perrault all right? He looked at Iron Axe beside him. How is Longsong's stronghold? Everything is fine. This strong alien man was a man of few words, and his answers were also very simple. But as long as he asked, he would always get an answer. Everything was fine, which meant that Jacques Med's plan did not succeed. He was a little relieved. If Stronghold had not been destroyed and the Honeysuckle family had not been harmed, Perrault would have said a few good words for him. As for Jacques Fate, he did not even bother to think about it. A fool who had almost dragged the elk into the abyss had nothing to do with him. Brother, what did Jacques do? Aurelia leaned over and asked in a low voice. He hesitated for a moment and finally shook his head. I don't know. Aurelia immediately showed a, you're lying to me, look. Ren smiled bitterly. He really did not know how to answer this question. If Jacques had tried to rebel, he had only heard about it at the stage of planning. As for what happened in the end, he had no idea at all. After a moment of silence, he said, Are you really going to follow us to the castle? Of course. I'm also very curious about what happened that made these people dare to break into the Count's mansion in broad daylight. At this point, she also stared at Iron Axe. Lord Perrault will not just sit by and do nothing. Ren knew that his sister was actually worried about him, so he finally nodded and said, well, if you ask him, he should tell you the details. The group rode along the snow-covered road for about an hour and arrived at the fortress at noon. Under the guidance of Iron Axe, Ren and his sister ascended to the third floor. The security here was even tighter, and there was a guard every few steps. After walking into a room that looked like a study, he finally saw Perrault Hull, his childhood friend. But she just stood there respectfully. There was also a man in gray sitting in front of the desk. He was playing with a quill in his hand and looking at Aurelia and himself with great interest. Almost instantly, Ren recalled the identity of this person. He immediately knelt down on one knee. Your Highness, Ren Vader pays his respects to you. This is. Aurelia was a little surprised, but under Ren's gentle gesture, she still bent her knees and bowed. We met in Longsong's stronghold, the prince said with a smile, in the basement of the castle. I just heard from Iron Axe that you've been locked up again this time. Ah. Ren was startled and didn't know how to answer for a moment. Fortunately, His Highness didn't really want to hear the answer. Get up. Before I ordered the attack on the Elk family's territory, Perrault repeatedly assured me that you would never participate in Jacques Med's rebellion. It seems that he was right. But, how did you get locked up? Ren looked at Perrault gratefully and then told him everything about his family. I see. The prince nodded. It's a pity. If you could stop the Earl of the Elk family, Longsong's stronghold wouldn't have to suffer this disaster. The prince's words shocked Ren. Aurelia couldn't help but ask, "Big brother, what's wrong?" Jacques Med colluded with the Maple Leaf, Wolf, and Wild Rose families and attacked Longsong's stronghold the day before yesterday. The prince said coldly, "This attack caused many innocent casualties and 2 blocks were burned down." In order to force the Honeysuckle family to surrender, they didn't hesitate to attack Perrault's family. When Ren heard the last sentence, he almost doubted that he had heard it wrong. Even when fighting against hostile nobles, it was an extremely shameful act to threaten the other side with family members. How could Jacques do such a thing? This rebellion involves a lot of people, but I guarantee that no one involved in the attack can escape the punishment of the law. The rebels will be severely punished. The prince knocked on the table and said, "I came to Longsong's stronghold this time to clean up the entire western region. I won't let go of even a single rat." Ren felt a thin layer of sweat appear on his back. "Your Highness, don't worry. I won't vent my anger on those who are innocent." Roland waved his hand and interrupted, "You don't have to worry about the Elk family being destroyed. In fact, I was just about to ask you a question. Jacques Med has died in the rebellion. Are you willing to inherit the Earl's position and serve me like Hull?" There was almost no other answer to this question. Ren Med knelt down without hesitation and swore allegiance with the standard knight ceremony. When he stated the oath, he was unexpectedly calm. In fact, he never hated the prince who took his father's life. On the battlefield, accidents could happen to anyone, not to mention that it was the Duke Ryan and the other 5 families who started the war, not the prince. After the war, he didn't treat the defeated nobles harshly. He even exchanged captives with ransom in the way the nobles tacitly agreed. If his father hadn't died on the spot, he would probably have returned to his territory safely like the Earl of Honeysuckle. Ren had received the knight's training and had also implemented the knight's philosophy in his heart. Any honorable battle was praiseworthy. On the contrary, Jacques' way of doing things was completely without honor. It was meaningless except for deepening the hatred between them. And for the sake of Aurelia and the other innocent members of his family, he had to agree. Without the protection of the Elk family, they would probably never be able to live a stable life again. After the oath, the prince nodded with a smile. "You and your sister can live in the castle for the next few days. Perrault will arrange rooms for you. There are still other families active in the suburbs. When the rebellion is completely quelled, you can return to your territory." "Yes, Your Highness." After Ren left the study, Perrault followed him out. Looking at his friend who had lost a lot of weight, Roland had mixed feelings for a moment. "I'm so sorry, it's not your fault." Perrault patted him on the shoulder. "Don't take it to heart." For some reason, he felt that there was some distance between them. In Perrault's eyes, there was a look that he had never seen before. It was like steel that had been repeatedly hammered in a furnace, reflecting a vague firmness and steadiness. Chapter 454. The rebellious nobles were vulnerable in front of the First Army. They only exchanged fire a few times, but the outcome was always decided after a round of volleys. They did not even need to replace the cartridge before they were routed and fled, leaving dozens of corpses behind. Most of the time, the First Army only pursued and hunted them down. Iron Axe cleared a piece of territory every day and captured the Elk, Wolf, and Wild Rose families' encampments one after another. However, when the troops advanced to the Maple Leaf territory, their attack momentum slowed down. They had run into unexpected trouble. "Damn it, this is no different from a stronghold." Brian looked at the towering Earl's mansion in front of him and spat angrily. "It even has a moat. Was anyone injured in the last round of attack?" Iron Axe asked coldly. 2 unlucky guys were injured. One was shot in the arm, and the other was shot in the back while retreating. "Fortunately, it's not a big problem," Brian said with a frown. The soldiers were at a disadvantage shooting at the roof from below. Even if they only had arrows and short bows, we would still be at a disadvantage. Iron Axe knew that Brian was right. No one had expected that the Earl of Maple Leaf would build his residence in the form of a tower, which was built on a mountain and backed by a rocky cliff. The stream flowing down from the impassable mountain range was led into a ditch more than 5 meters wide, forming a small moat around the mansion. Because it was running water, it was not completely frozen even though it was covered with floating ice and snow. There was only one entrance to the whole tower. If they wanted to attack the gate, they had to cross the arch bridge, which was also an important part of the enemy's defense. There was no cover around the Earl's mansion, only flat snowy ground. The First Army could shoot from a high vantage point to make up for the short range of their bows. After 2 rounds of probing attacks, the First Army only managed to kill 3 or 4 of their opponents, while several of their own were wounded. If only the artillery battalion was here, Brian said bitterly. I don't believe that he won't surrender after a few shots at the gate. Unfortunately, they can't come here. This place is too far from the stronghold and the snow is too deep. Iron Axe looked up at the sky and said, let's call it a day. Arrange for the soldiers to set up camp. The fief of the Maple Leaf family was located in the northwest of Longsong Stronghold, next to the impassable mountain range, which was also the edge of the western region. Just walking to this place took almost a day's worth of effort. In addition, there was no one to clear the snow on the road, so the 12-pound field artillery could not move an inch. According to the information they obtained, the Maple family had contributed very little to the rebellion. Even the Earl himself didn't show up, which meant that the enemy's strength was almost intact. If they were all holed up in this fortress-like tower without siege weapons, it would be very difficult to deal with them. After nightfall, a bonfire was lit in the tents of the camp. What should we do tomorrow? Brian added a piece of wood to the fire pit. Order the soldiers to rush forward while facing the arrows. As long as we can blow up that damn iron gate, their time of death will come. But the First Army would also suffer a dozen casualties. Iron Axe shook his head and did not answer. If he had been in Iron Sand City before, not to mention 10 guards, even if he had to lead 100 guards, as long as he could complete the task assigned by the chief, he would not hesitate to sacrifice all of them. But after coming to the western region, he saw how these soldiers had grown to where they were today. At the thought of His Highness Roland's painstaking efforts on them, he felt a little reluctant. After a long silence, he exhaled a white breath and said, let's ask the witches. Brian was startled. Ask them. Iron Axe did not want to do so. He remembered His Highness had once said that a qualified army should have the ability to complete a task independently at any time. But now was not the time to compete. In order to achieve the goal of unifying the western region within a week and to reduce casualties as much as possible, he would not bite the bullet with an inexplicable pride. Because His Highness had also said that a good general was responsible for the lives of his soldiers. Send out a messenger and tell them that we're in trouble and need Miss Maggie's help, he ordered. The next morning, Maggie and Lightning arrived at the camp. What happened? Cuckoo. Iron Axe coughed twice and briefly explained the current thorny problem. The enemy is mainly concentrated at the top of the tower, so the damage to them is limited. In addition, there is an iron gate at the entrance, so it's difficult for the First Army to get close to it. We can only ask you to open the exit. Leave it to us, the little girl said, patting her chest. Both of them were familiar with throwing, as they had trained with the First Army in Border Town. Iron Axe nodded and immediately began to arrange the soldiers to prepare for the final attack. Regardless of whether the bag could achieve the desired effect or not, at least it could deter the enemy. Taking advantage of this time, they should have enough time to destroy the iron gate. You want to go into battle yourself? Brian looked at Iron Axe in surprise and stuffed the loaded cartridge into his belt. It's not so much for me to charge, it's better to charge with me, Iron Axe smiled. This is what His Highness often says. When the two of them led the soldiers into the charging position, the figure of Maggie appeared on the horizon. She turned into a giant beast and swooped down to the tower along the rocky cliff, holding a bag in her sharp claws. Everyone saw this amazing scene. The first army suddenly burst into loud cheers, while the top of the tower fell into chaos. The mercenaries and guards of the Maple Leaf family all turned their bows and shot at the giant beast, but it was a pity that the effect was negligible. Maggie had finished accumulating speed. She spread her huge wings and flapped them hard, abruptly pulled her body up, and at the same time, released her claws. The bag was like a cannonball, whistling straight to the top of the tower. Iron Axe felt the surroundings suddenly fall silent, and then he saw a dazzling fireball rising from the top of the tower. In an instant, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The whole world seemed to be trembling. A huge column of smoke rose into the air with snow and fog, and a wave of heat rushed toward him. He could not help but take 2 steps back, his ears hurting from the shock. This is the power of God. Iron Axe could not help but recall the scene of the first time he witnessed His Highness's test explosion. This time, the explosion was far more powerful than before, and he could still feel the scorching heat contained in the fireball from a distance of nearly 100 meters. As for the enemies who were close to God's punishment on the top of the tower, it was easy to imagine what would happen to them. After silently praying to the 3 gods, Iron Axe raised his hand and shouted, "For His Highness, the First Army, charge! For His Highness!" The soldiers shouted the slogan and swarmed toward the Earl's mansion. This time, no one dared to stop them. When Iron Axe returned to Longsong's stronghold, it was the evening of the 6th day. The entire western region was finally under the control of Roland. To be continued. Chapter 455. The study in Stronghold was much more spacious than the office in Border Town. Tall bookcases occupied the left and right walls, and the edges of the bookcases were inlaid with gilded metal, which was stuffed with all kinds of books. Along the way, Roland saw everything from epics to historical travelogues. To facilitate access to the books on the top floor, there was a wooden staircase beside the bookcase. Probably for safety reasons, the only window in the study was only half a person's height, and an iron railing was installed outside. When light shone into the room from the outside, a narrow beam of light could be seen clearly on the old plush carpet, giving the room a sense of isolation. If it were Anna, she would definitely like this place, Roland could not help thinking. But for him, the Border Town office with floor-to-ceiling windows and always bright rooms was more to his liking. Even though it was narrow, it was full of comfort. As for Nightingale, she often leaned against the fireplace and dozed off, which showed how much she disliked this place. At this time, there was a knock on the door. "Come in." Roland put The Secret History of the Western Region back into the bookcase. "Your Highness." Perot Hull walked into the study and put a stack of white paper on the table. "I've finished the statistics you asked me to do." Roland returned to the desk and carefully looked through the list of nobles. "Are these all the remaining nobles in the Western region?" "Yes," Perot explained briefly. "I divided them into 2 categories, guilty and innocent, and then sorted them by their family names. There are a total of 64 guilty nobles, and 137 people refused to participate in the rebellion or knew nothing about it. Most of the latter are free knight, sir, and minor nobles." Roland opened the first page of the list. The first one was the Maple Leaf Earl, Roman Candy. According to Iron Axe's report, this great noble had hidden himself in a wine barrel in the basement after his mansion had been breached. When the First Army found him, he was so scared that even his pants were wet. He was also the rebel with the highest rank captured in this unification war. The next page was filled with the nobles of the Maple Leaf family, such as the 2 sons, other relatives, and the Enfeft Knight. Roland quickly flipped to the last page and folded the table with satisfaction. Good job. All in all, the 6 big families of the Western region had become history. Lion Ryan, Maple Leaf, Wolf, and Wild Rose would never have a chance to rise again. Although the Honeysuckle family and the Elk family survived, they were no longer the feudal nobles in the past. All the power of the western region would be in his hands. Your Highness. Perrault hesitated for a moment before saying, the guilty and innocent verdicts on the list were provided to me by Mr. Iron Axe. Is it possible that there might be a miscarriage of justice? Roland couldn't help but chuckle. He's very good at interrogating people, and he didn't torture them, so I think the final verdict can be trusted. In fact, this was just a cover. After all the captured nobles were locked up in the dungeon, Nightingale was responsible for identifying them. She only needed to ask a few simple questions to find out whether they had participated in the rebellion. This was also the reason why Roland dared to wipe out the nobles. With the help of Nightingale, he could really not let go of a bad guy, nor wrongly accuse a good guy. He didn't implicate the nobles, nor did he pretend to be open-minded and let the rioters go. Then, what are you going to do with these guilty nobles? What's wrong? Roland raised his head and glanced at Perrault. Are there any of your friends among them? No, Your Highness. The latter shook his head. I just think that if you execute them all, it may be detrimental to your rule in the future. A week ago, you asked for an eye for an eye. The prince raised his eyebrows with interest. Now you want to let them go. I do want them all to go to hell, but even if I strangle them one by one, it won't change anything. Instead, it may arouse the resentment of the other nobles towards the Honeysuckle family. And if the news of wantonly executing the nobles spreads, other cities may also set off a wave of opposition against your rule. Hearing this, Roland was quite surprised. This was indeed the way of thinking of a mature politician. Putting aside personal emotions, it was more about weighing interests. It seemed that this incident did not make him more disgusted with fighting, but made him mature. It's okay to tell you in advance. He stood up and walked to the small window. I'll announce the ins and outs of this matter to everyone, and then publicly sentence all the rioters in the square, including the nobles, guards, squires, and mercenaries. The main culprits, the direct initiators of the rebellion, and the villains with the people's blood on their hands, will be hanged, and the accomplices will be stripped of their titles and sent to the North Slope mine for labor reform. According to this method, only 5 or 6 nobles will be hanged. The Earl of the Elk family and the Viscount of the Wolf family have already died on the battlefield, and the rest of them will be equivalent to using their titles to save their lives. After the news spreads, I don't think anyone will think that this sentence is too harsh. After all, betraying the royal family is a felony. Perrault was a little relieved. Your Highness is merciful. When the eldest son of the Honeysuckle family left, Roland felt an unprecedented sense of fulfillment. This action had completely cleared the obstacles to the integration of the Western region for him. In the future, whether it was making laws or issuing policies, he would be unimpeded in this vast land. More importantly, he had gained the support of a large number of people and nobles. After the opposition was eliminated, the remaining people were naturally potential supporters. Especially after the nobles lost their feudal power and legal rights, if they wanted to live a comfortable life, they had to follow his policies and spare no effort to promote them. Because the nobles had far more resources than the commoners, as long as they used their brains a little, it was not difficult to gain benefits from it. Once they tasted the sweetness, they would never want to go back to the bitter days they used to have. After all, these small nobles had not enjoyed the benefits of the territory, and if they did not manage it well, they would have to pay for it. Soon they would realize that as long as they played chess according to the rules, they could easily live a life they had never imagined before. There was no doubt that the plan to build the city had taken a big step forward. Roland wiped the condensed water vapor off the window and looked through the blurry window at the city shrouded in white snow. Since he had to stay here for a while, and he would often come to Longsong's stronghold to deal with government affairs, he might as well transform this study into a prince's office according to his preferences. Chapter 456. 3 days later, Roland gave a speech in the theater of Longsong Stronghold. For this propaganda, he asked Perrault to inform the whole city of the details of the rebellion in advance, and specially asked Maggie to send a reply from Border Town. On that day, the crowd gathered in the theater was smaller than he had imagined. Although it was already spring, the snowflakes kept people from going out. Fortunately, the Second Army and their families were all present. It seemed that the generous compensation for the soldiers killed in the battle had worked. As for the other people, he could slowly win them over in the future. Roland believed that the best propaganda was from word of mouth. As long as the seeds were planted in the hearts of these people, it would sooner or later affect more people. This was also the reason why he insisted on building the people's army. They were a sharp blade, an iron wall, and also a role model for propaganda. Good morning, my subjects. I'm Roland Wimbledon, Lord of the Western Region. I believe most of you have already heard of my name. Roland looked around at the people under the stage. First of all, I would like to express my condolences for the casualties caused by this turmoil. This was a conspiracy from King's City. In order to interfere with the order of the Western Region, Timothy provoked wars again and again. Regrettably, the four families of the Western Region not only did not stand on the side of the people, but also became the thugs of the other side, which eventually led to this tragedy. The prince did not talk too much about the content of the rebellion. Compared with his own serious speech, people preferred to inquire about these secrets in the tavern. Therefore, after a simple beginning, he shifted the topic to the compensation that the people were more concerned about. During the turmoil, among the 112 soldiers of the Second Army of the Western Region, 56 were killed in the battle. The rioters also set fire and looted the residential area, causing 12 houses to be burned down and 48 civilians to die. Roland said in a deep voice, "Here, I apologize to the people of Longsong Stronghold. As the guardian of the territory, I failed to fulfill my responsibility." The prince's words caused a commotion among the crowd. It was obvious that no one had ever heard of the royal family apologizing to the people. Many people were shocked and astonished, but in Roland's eyes, this was just the attitude that a lord should have. He did not have the unreasonable arrogance and self-esteem of the nobles. If he did not put the people in his eyes, the people would not truly support the people who led them. This was also repeatedly proven by history. I guarantee that everyone's blood will not be spilled in vain. Not only would the fallen soldiers receive a generous burial, but their families would also receive a pension of 5 golden dragons. Moreover, they could also receive a portion of food and charcoal from the city hall every month as additional compensation. This standard is exactly the same as the First Army of the Western Region, and I hereby promise that the new subjects of the Second Army will also receive the same treatment. The cheers were few and far between. It was obvious that most of the people in the fortress were skeptical about the generous compensation. After all, embezzlement and embezzlement were common occurrences. Even the winter relief rations were mixed with sand and leaves, let alone the golden dragon. However, Roland had already thought of a way to deal with it. Since it was a publicity event, he naturally had to make it a hot topic. He clapped his hands, and Perrault, Iron Axe, and 2 soldiers of the First Army carrying a box walked up to the stage. At this moment, I have a list of the deceased in my hands. Now, the governor of Longsong Stronghold, Perrault Hull, will personally distribute the pension to you. As the soldiers poured all the golden coins in the box on the table, the people's reaction became enthusiastic. Second Army, Gun Battalion, 1st Squad, Aya. Second Army, Gun Battalion, 1st Squad, Iron Pillar. Iron Axe slowly read the names on the list. One by one, the family members went up to the stage and excitedly received the golden dragon. They bowed and knelt down. The scene was a little chaotic. Roland even felt Nightingale's hand on his waist. Fortunately, despite the chaos, no accidents happened in the end. When the pension was finally distributed, it was already close to noon. Roland waved his arm to silence the noisy discussion in the theater. Those who are homeless because of the war will also be given shelter and food rations. Until the end of the months of demons, there will be special personnel to distribute them to you. Then, Your Highness, what about after the end of the months of demons? Someone asked loudly. Of course, the questioner was created by Echo. At that time, City Hall will provide a lot of jobs. Not only will you have a good salary, but you will also enjoy it. As long as you are willing to work, you will never have to worry about food. Roland raised his right hand and said loudly, the Western region will not forget those who have sacrificed for it, and neither will I. This time, the reaction of the crowd was much more enthusiastic. Everyone raised their right hands in response to the prince's declaration. Amidst the cheers of his subjects, Roland timely ordered his men to distribute meat porridge, which pushed the atmosphere to a new high. In the afternoon, more people gathered in the theater. Not only were all the seats occupied, but many people even squatted in the aisles. Obviously, they were all here for the afternoon trial. It seemed that people all over the world, and even the other world, loved to watch how the prisoners were punished. Roland handed over the hosting duties to Iron Axe and Perrault. He sat in the luxury box on the second floor of the theater and also became an audience. The result of the trial had long been decided. The prisoners were dragged onto the stage and lined up in a row in front of the people. Behind them stood solemn soldiers with guns. Iron Axe announced the charges, and Perrault read the verdict. Then the soldiers escorted them to the execution ground, which was the square of Stronghold. When some of the victims' families saw their enemies, they also rushed up to fight. As long as it was not life-threatening, the First Army would not stop them. No one pitied these villains. They should have expected such a day when they burned, killed, and looted. In the end, a total of 132 people were sentenced to death. 6 of them were great nobles, and the rest were mercenaries, guards, and servants. The execution methods were also different. Due to the limited number of gallows, only the nobles could enjoy this treatment. The others were all executed by shooting. This was also the first time that firearms were used to execute people. Although the remaining 900 people had participated in the rebellion, their hands were not stained with blood, so they were imprisoned and were waiting to be sent to the North Slope mine in batches. At this point, the resistance of the nobles in the western region was completely wiped out. The next day, Roland summoned all the innocent nobles to the castle hall. Clearing the obstacles was just the beginning. He still had a lot of work to do if he wanted to really rule this place. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.